In a modern world, yet full of technological mysteries, our protagonist awakens with a military AI from the future starts speaking inside his head, and the guy realizes he might have. With not much else to do, he begins to wander around, trying to discover why everything was happening and why he was sent to this time. But without further ado, let's get to the good part. Some electrical circuits from a traffic light start malfunctioning. Suddenly, on a street, the protagonist becomes conscious, looking at his body without understanding anything. The protagonist turns, seeing his reflection in a bus mirror passing by. He stares at himself, wanting to know who he was and what his name was, until he notices a special forces. The protagonist moves his arm, realizing the clothes were a type of military uniform. He couldn't even remember his name, what he was doing, or where he was, until he hears a crying sound beside him. The protagonist turns, ready to strike. Attacking a tree and breaking it with all his strength, the birds flying around make their noise. Kong is surprised by the strength of his attack as he knocked down the tree. The protagonist moved instinctively when he heard the sound, wanting to know what kind of strength this was. But the voice in his head says it was a pleasure to meet the agent. He was the artificial intelligence of the auxiliary combat system implanted in the body. Kong repeats about being embedded in him, then questions where they were and what year it was. The AI responds that based on the analysis of the posters, they seem to be in Seoul in the year 2024. He was from the military AI model created in the year 2082, deducing that he was from. The AI explains that its memory was reset, and it lost all information like the. On the other side of the street, a driver calmly drives his truck, until he notices the broken signal and tries to brake immediately. Without success, the truck starts driving uncontrollably around there. The system warns that a traffic accident risk was detected, and he should dodge the car coming his way. But the vehicle hits a fence and throws a stake in his direction. Kong dodges the attack purely by reflex. But looking back, he notices people saying a civilian was hit by the metal stake in the stomach. They shout to call an ambulance, and the system notifies that a civilian was injured. Kong opens his eyes and comments that he saw some red and blue screens now. Thanks to that, he was able to dodge easily, but an innocent civilian might lose their life in 5 minutes. He says it's impossible for the ambulance to arrive, and the AI responds that it can perform the surgery. Kong didn't know how to do it, but the AI could, and first, they need to know the patient's condition. He looks at the body and repeats about it. Thinking there are still many questions, but he will save the injured person first due to urgency, approaching the man immediately. Kong analyzes the stake embedded in the abdomen, saying the wound is deep and asks if the system can handle it. He says that with thread, needle, knife, and disinfectant, he can perform the. The protagonist repeats about the materials and asks if he can perform surgery with just that. A civilian questions if he could perform first aid. The protagonist wonders if he can trust this AI and repeats about the materials mentioned before. That civilian shouts, saying anyone with the materials could go there to help. With everything in hand, the people that wonder who that guy was and if he was a doctor. The patient might get an infection and lose his life if he performs surgery with these things. Kong whispers to the robot that he already has the tools but still waits to start. The system says that if he grants temporary control, it could move his hands. He really wanted to know what it was, but there's no time. The protagonist's hands emit a small blue glow and begin to move on their own. The stake is removed from the abdomen, and with his fingers, Kong flexes the needle. His fingers were moving at incredible speed and with absurd precision. His system says the expected blood loss of the patient exceeded the limit, and the survival rate was dropping. Kong wonders about this, and if the system can really save him. Suddenly, the patient's blood splatters. At the hospital, they inform that it's an emergency and the patient has severe hemorrhage, requiring immediate. A doctor comes out sighing, and his assistant asks if they are finished. The doctor says the patient survived. His colleague congratulates him and asks if the injury was as severe as they thought. The doctor denies it but was shocked to see that without stopping the hemorrhage, he would have died before the ambulance arrived. He lost a lot of blood, but most of it has already been replaced by transfusion, and the assistant asks what. The doctor says he was sutured with regular thread, internally and externally. The problem was that the stitches were uniform, as if made by a sewing machine. The assistant tells him not to be ridiculous, and the doctor says he also didn't believe it, until someone. Park Kyung introduces himself as a detective and asks about the patient. The doctor responds that. But he wants to know if it's true that the surgery was done in the middle of the street, and Young says he was also surprised. The citizen asked for a knife but used a box cutter, scaring the doctors. Young asks if it was difficult, and the doctor confirms, impossible to do on. The human body cannot be cut precisely with a box cutter, as in the reports. Young says the man left the location after the surgery. In a public bathroom on the other side of the city, Kyung washes his hands and comments that he thought the system had given. The protagonist asks about the memory loss, and the system says it was reset. Kyung wants to know if the AI remembers his name, but it denies it. The protagonist says he would give it a name and ask what it is. The system responds that it is an AI of the implanted combat system. From now on, that would be the robot's name. Questioning why it wasn't responding, the AI informs that its name became. If he wanted to change it, he should say so, while the protagonist asks if it could. In denies it. Kyung comments that there was an emblem on his clothes saying Earth Union, and John says it was a military uniform. The protagonist concludes that he was an agent without memory, and even though it was made in 2082, they were. The internet couldn't be accessed because data input and output are restricted. Kyung asks how it receives data, and John says it uses its senses, feeling the same if he eats. The output uses body and voice temporarily, assisting only when necessary. There are also things it cannot do, for example, assist with aiming, but it cannot shoot. Kyung simplifies that it only helps in combat, and to know the reason for being there, he needs to experience it. The protagonist's first mission of the day, betting that he could get a lot of information inside him. Kyung hadn't recovered his memory, but it was common sense that they needed money. He had nothing, so they had to get 10,001 first. Kyung asks if John can use vocal cords to sing, and the system says it helps if necessary. Elsewhere, the protagonist holds a spoon, with a mask on his face, ready to sing. The system prepared everything and brought a spoon. Kyung asks if singing helps in battle, and John says it boosts others' morale. It made sense, but the protagonist questions why sing there, and how to compete with. The protagonist observes from afar, and John says if he performs better, he would attract all the attention. Kyung thinks that either way, he would get attention. Then he calls John, saying it's a good AI, but he doesn't believe it will work. The robot ignores him. He closes his eyes and begins to sing an almost perfect melody. Everyone admires the young man, commenting that it was their favorite song or that the chant was great. The protagonist wonders if the heartthrob pose is necessary, and John says engaging the audience. People comment about the incredible singer without instruments, and decide to leave the band to see him. The band is shocked, and the audience is moved by Kyung's melody. The protagonist sings his traditional Korean song, and wonders if it's really working. The audience wonders who the singer is and how he can use both low and high notes like that, as it's incredible. They notice he repeats the same verse because the song was collected today. The minimum funds for the operation were acquired with people putting money in the box. Kyung congratulates the good work and says they should leave, running while people asked him to sing one more. From afar, a blonde girl admires everything. She is enchanted by the protagonist's voice and appearance, until a customer informs Unseo but she would like to hear a bit more about the music. She says that at the internet cafe they might find data from the Earth Federation, but questions what if they find nothing. John comments that the priority is to infiltrate and fit in, and they need. The protagonist notices a paper stating they were hiring and requires an ID with a resume, and that was a way to get shelter, and they even provide food for employees. John says that if he succeeds in infiltrating, the information gathering and food problem will be solved. Kyung climbs the stairs and comments that if he gets the job, he'll ask if he can stay and needs a place to sleep. John says that if they secure shelter, the rest will resolve itself, and Kyung still didn't have extra clothes. The system notes that his military uniform has a camouflage feature using chameleon memory. The clothing can be divided into multiple pieces and assembled in different formats. The protagonist decides to try separating the sleeve from his shirt. Thus, he begins the transformation into his new outfit. The protagonist finally finishes what he had done, wearing a ridiculous red outfit this time. Kyung comments that this outfit looks like the bands he saw earlier, and questions why John wasn't saying anything. Two other guys climb the stairs and comment that even with the internet cafe next door, he should dress better, until they know. The protagonist stares at them, and they pass by pretending he doesn't exist. Kyung watches them climb in silence and comments that they didn't like his outfit, and John says it's possible. With a normal outfit, he climbs the stairs and John says it was perfect because wearing a cap was. Kyung turns the doorknob of the internet cafe and enters the place. He looks from side to side and begins to scan. Convenience stores had been checked along with their payment methods. The status of meals was checked along with suitable spaces for temporary residents. This place was great for his current situation. Within that calm environment, people play or watch videos while browsing the internet. The shop owner deduces that the protagonist was applying for the job, questioning if he doesn't have a. Then he informs that he can make the resume there, and should just bring the ID tomorrow, as he needs a. Hoping he is qualified for the job, the owner reflects that he is not bad, but it seemed he had come there just to sit and relax, and even with John notifies that he has military kitchen tactical skills for soldier management. The protagonist says he can, and the shop owner asks him to make some fried rice. Kanban walks into the kitchen and looks at a corner there. Khan asks if she can do it, and should make it tasty, while Jean requests temporary control of the hands. The protagonist allows it, and thus they move the kitchen utensils. He opens the fridge and gathers the materials on the table, thinking that somehow his body was moving. The shop owner notices something in his kitchen, surprised to see the protagonist cooking. He thinks he was just going to reheat some frozen rice, but was cooking from scratch. The protagonist prepares a perfect dish with each ingredient of his fried rice. That shop owner wonders how he was doing it so quickly. Khan hands over the dish saying it was ready, and the shop owner thinks he can't see his hands moving, and being fast was, and he cooks so fast it must still be raw, putting a bit on the spoon while informing he. As he puts the spoon in his mouth, he chews a bit. Khan wonders mentally if it was bad. The shop owner finishes chewing and digesting the food, and then puts the spoon. Ordering a soldier to be brought over until realizing it was an internet cafe, and for a second, he thought he was at his. The shop owner introduces his niece, Chan Seo, and says they should get along well. Chan Seo says he was the guy singing outside earlier. The girl says that with a voice like his, he doesn't need to work in an internet cafe, and the protagonist. The shop owner says he's happy because he has a young man to cook, and Oun Seo can't even make instant noodles. Questioning if the young man has a preferred schedule to work, Khan says he prefers to work part-time. He also noticed earlier that there was a storage room and would like to stay there, and the owner asks if he. The protagonist explains that he has been homeless for some time, and the shop owner thinks these are demanding. The internet cafe next door became a success due to good food and was jealous of it, so he will use the opportunity to gain it. The girl asks him to eat something before playing, but the young man says the internet cafe also serves. She complains that the food there is terrible, and Khan calls the customer, saying he should try his food first. A few minutes later, the rice dish is ready. The protagonist asks her to bring a plate, and the girl runs to get it. He had already done it, and even the dish was perfect. Outside, the girl comments that the newcomer was really bold, wondering how good the food from an internet cafe can be. Won Seo arrives, saying their fried rice was made, and Kim Jae is startled because he hadn't even started playing. Kim Jae says they only ordered fried rice because it seemed really expensive, and the girl says that's what. Both decide they will eat, taking a spoonful to their mouths. They are shocked by the taste and have an epiphany, remembering when they were chubby and chasing after a chicken. Upon catching and grabbing that food, they hid behind a bush to eat. They cry, remembering it was the same taste as before. Shouting that it was delicious and this place was really the best place with fried rice. They order more dishes, and other customers decide they should try it too, ordering 2 more, and a man. Won Seo runs towards the kitchen. The shop owner questions if the protagonist can handle it. Khan turns and calls for John, asking if she can make 12 meals taste good. GM confirms because tactical field cooking was done on a large scale, and providing tasty food. Soldiers could feel demoralized if they ate bad food after risking themselves, and Khan says it was. After about 3 hours from the start of the shift, the shop owner had his face full of money and asks what his name is. These sales in 3 hours had been incredible, and he will pay him double with no ulterior motives, but wants to. The protagonist introduces himself as Nakangan. That shop owner says he will clean the storage room for him and stock the ingredients, so he should keep up the good work. GM questions if he remembered his real name, and the protagonist denies it and says it just came out reflexively. The boss says they got more orders for fried rice, and he could handle it. A few minutes later on a PC, the protagonist says they found a place to stay, but to receive his payment, Khan asks if she can do the same thing with a bank, but it was impossible because her abilities were local. The protagonist reclines in the chair, saying it was expected. Assuming they were infiltrating in 2024 for a secret mission, he questions if. GM confirms and asks for control of the protagonist's hands. The Korean government's database searches for similar information to his, and should keep his eye. The protagonist says he didn't need to complain anymore, until he noticed something, asking to wait a second. GM says an unknown error was detected, and the information for Nakangan was already registered. The fingerprints were the same with 100% accuracy. The protagonist wonders how this was possible, and it was from the Earth Federation of 2082. Checking the information of the major countries, there was no result for the Earth Federation in 2024. Khan wonders if he exists simultaneously in 2024 and 2022. The protagonist asks to look at his personal data, and there must be some important clue. In the search result, the protagonist had nothing besides being a former member of the. Currently, it indicated he was unemployed. The girl says he really types fast, asking if he also knows how to develop programs, and the protagonist says it. Unseo says her uncle gave her his card to go to the market with Mr. Khan, and they should go together. Outside, she comments that it was a relief to be able to leave after working for hours, and Nakong really cut things super. She says he put all the heavy ingredients in a pot, but was carrying it easily. His arms seemed totally made of iron. But it was a waste to go out, and she wonders if they can go to her cafe. After all, they were talking about her uncle's card, until someone bumps into her. The girl is thrown into Kang's arms, and the men tell her to watch where she's going. if she doesn't want to lose her life, leaving the protagonist on alert. GM warns about hostile targets detected, asking if he would like to switch to combat mode. Unseo interrupts the cold atmosphere and apologizes for that. She says she will be more careful from now on, and the gangster says she really got scared. His brother was losing all day, so he wasn't in a good mood, but it was okay, and GM says the target was leaving, and the security mode was maintained. Kang just stares at this, and they take the elevator to the 4th floor. He questions if the girl was okay and Unseo confirms, but was just scared and ended up crying. Back at the cafe, the shop owner runs to them shouting that it was an emergency, and was calling her. The internet suddenly went down and it was chaos there. Kang watches this with a serious expression, wondering if they could have been tracked by a hacker when they accessed government. In that case, they need to access the base from there, and Kang questions where the server was. He will try to fix it based on what he knows. GM hadn't found any trace of someone tracking them, but managed to notice a hacking attempt. Kang wonders why, because it was just an internet cafe. The AI explains it was a hacking program installed, and the function collided with the security program, causing They may have used the internet cafe for the test, and Kang says to find out who the GM starts tracking the person and typing on the keyboard. The hacker's location is identified, and he moved the signal through 7 servers, preventing it from being tracked. 6 of them were abroad, but 1 was nearby. Kang says they must have chosen a nearby internet cafe to test this, and asks why distance matters, and if it could have been those guys from earlier, until someone shouts they were disconnected in the middle of a ranked match. Unseo says she will extend his time for free, but the guy says he almost won the match. Kang says that the customer seemed really angry and asks if GM has a solution, with the AI suggesting offering food as it. There was a list of simple snacks, and the protagonist chooses number 3. Kang jokes that GM really likes money, but the robot doesn't understand. Unseo apologizes to the customer. The servers have been stabilized, so the internet won't go down again, and that popcorn would be on the house. That man takes the cup of popcorn, asking if he thought this would replace his game, throwing the man starts moaning and shouting with happiness, saying he feels very good and has the energy to read. Unseo questions how he did that, and if he put something magical in those snacks, because it must be. She chews a little and is impressed, saying it was salty, but also sweet and the perfect mix. He needs to deal with the internet problem for a while, so he should deliver this to the affected customers. Unseo stares at him as he leaves, saying that if there were a hero in modern times, Jian comments that they should eliminate the enemy that attacked their base, and Kang says he knows, and that was the reason there was no television, guards, or tactical detection equipment nearby. Kang says they really made an effort to stay hidden and they will go in there. The protagonist climbs the stairs of the building, saying he heard something coming from that red door, and Jian amplifies the audio, extracting. He feels sorry and didn't know what kind of work it was, asking them not to take his life. Jian says the analysis suggests a civilian student was being threatened, and they should recover. Inside there, those gangsters from yesterday say if he makes another excuse, he will lose his life. Kang prepares a kick and strikes the door to break it. A nerd was crouched on the floor and lets out a cry of astonishment. The protagonist hides his identity with a mask and cap. Those gangsters get up and walk towards him while the nerd continues crying in fear, asking if there were more of. A gangster asks if his friend hadn't locked the door, but he had, then wants to know how some. He is going to kick the man out from now on, and Kang punches him, throwing the gangster away while the protagonist maintains his combat stance. He looks coldly at the others he will attack next. The nerd's name is An Song Hwan, and he was a first-year student at Korean University. He was interested in computer hacking since he was young, and now he has become a skilled hacker to the point where professionals. When he was looking for a part-time job, he received a recruitment message. The guy repeats it was a job for a security company and it only took 3 or 4 days, but paid for the. He is going to start now and has never been so excited to get a job in all his experience, but it had been a scam. He hadn't experienced everything yet, but he would generally lose his life this way and he was preparing for the worst. Song Hwan is startled when he sees the protagonist striking the gangster, thinking his hero had appeared. With a few seconds passing in the classroom, the protagonist thinks he had entered, but doesn't know if it's the right thing to do. Com comments that he was really strong and knocked out that giant guy with one blow, and G. Because the opponents in front of him were armed with knives and the gangster asks where the hell he came from and who he was. The protagonist repeats he shouldn't be scared and G reminds him that as a special agent, his body was. Com raises his finger towards them, shouting that he was walking and heard someone being beaten and then went in there. Jian says he had made an unintentional provocation and the hostility increased, while the long Com whispers that physically he can easily win and will focus on attacking mentally as well. The long-haired thug says he kept running his mouth while he was the only one walking, until his sentence is interrupted by the bald guy runs towards him calling him a crazy bastard. Com turns and changes the direction of his foot, striking the killer's head with extreme ease. He is knocked out and falls to the ground with the protagonist having finished them all. Com comments that his kick was really very powerful and his movements seem mechanical and G and says, the protagonist thinks they could be steroids, but they weren't used in training. Songwon thinks this guy was murmuring to himself since then, wondering if he could be a police officer communicating. No matter how innocent he was now, if you look at his past, he was a bad hacker, taking money and changing other people's passwords. Maybe he knows about the 10 times he used his skills for minor matters and why his past self did that. Then he shouts that he didn't do any of that. He just did what he was told and was really a good guy, so he asked to be let go and Com thinks no one accused him. Jian says the chance of him telling the truth is 90% and he seemed like an ethical hacker in Com. He can analyze expressions and behaviors of prisoners to determine their reality. The more precise, the more reliable the results. Com says he really has skills for everything, but there was still a 10%. Then asks why he was in that place. Songwon says he was tricked into a part-time job checking security and was locked there. These guys were really bad men and after that job, they were trying to keep him doing bad things like stock manipulation. He was told to create a program to manipulate comments on stock forums and they went directly to the protagonist remembers when he had met them earlier. Songwon says they must be from a group of that type of manipulation. There was probably someone behind them, so they must be hired. Since they were targeting his temporary base, at least he was safe for now but can't let them go and has to deal with. Then he tells him to call the police and say he was kidnapped because when they come just tell them everything that happened. Songwon questions if he won't get in trouble and Com complaints about being called old, asking if he even knows what his face looked like, but the nerd says no. Khan says he was just someone who saved him when he was passing by and heard someone came and beat him so he helped. And now he's going to leave, asking if he should wait for the police. The nerd denies it for that reason, but questions if he can hit them a little too when he could say it. The protagonist says they won't wake up and he can do it with confidence. Songwon prepares his fist and advances to the thief, trying to hit his head, but the bald man suddenly wakes up. He screams as loud as he can, scaring even Com. The police cars arrive at that location. They were still alive and question Songwon about what was happening there. The nerd says those bastards locked him up for 3 days and beat him until he made a program to manipulate stock forums and would take. That officer questions how they ended up that way and Songwon says he didn't do it and a guy heard. The detective talks about these guys manipulating stocks and there was definitely someone behind them. When these guys wake up, June shouldn't interrogate them and wonder while they were under the influence of. June questions who was the guy who beat them up like that and the detective replies that he was just a passerby. They just had some broken bones and won't lose their lives. Besides, they drew the knife first. June questions what he should do when the detective tells him to get the security footage and find out who did all this. They don't need to arrest him, but it was too big of a matter to leave aside without. Khan walks down the street and June says there's a camera ahead and he should turn right. The protagonist questions if he's sure the buildings don't have cameras and June confirms because they need to. Khan says he was really surprised earlier because he didn't expect him to get up with just a slap, and the protagonist suggests she might have a phone function, but the AI wasn't capable of that. So the young man decides to get a cell phone, but since he doesn't have money, he's going to his temporary home. 3 days have passed since the incident. The day after retreating from the civil hacker, he went to the address to get information about him, but it was just there were only rumors that they burned down the whole house. Wondering who he was and what kind of place this was where he was, with not much information to gather, he has no choice but to return empty-handed and full of questions. Back at the internet cafe, they had found peace and business grew more and more. Along with the part-time work alongside Unseo, the internet cafe had become famous thanks to influencers, and especially when he leaves, these dishes aren't sold. It was a random sales method that had an unexpected effect, and the internet cafe started gathering. Some only came because of the food, but most stayed using the internet cafe for. Now, judging by the face of the owner, Cha Dong took the number of customers increased, and it seemed he hired. That familiar nerd voice says it was good to see him, and his name was Song Hwan. While Jian comments that he was the civilian they had rescued from captivity 3 days ago, Dong's Tuk says he was really. Then he bows his head, saying he hopes to get along well with Unseo and Kong. Song Hwan thinks the reason he applied there was the bad feeling for having caused damage to the internet cafe. Even though he forced himself to do it, he will work hard. Dong's Tuk introduces Kong, saying he was the boss who made the restaurant famous but was good with computers too and they should get along. Song Hwan notices something and says anyway, he must be older than him, relieving the nerd says it was nice to meet him and asks to take care of him. Kong shakes his hand and agrees, while Jian warns that working with this person puts his identity at risk and recommends asking the boss to fire him. The protagonist wonders how he could do that while calling him young and says he will work hard with the nerd. In a market, they evaluate today's list to confirm. All purchases were completed and the recipe had been securely stored as well. The protagonist says Jian seems really tough when it comes to food and money, and the robot says money control was essential. Kong says it was good and avoids detection, but honestly, it would be nice to enjoy and eat. Suddenly, a fire alarm goes off. The protagonist looks at the street, which was apparently normal, saying that Jian was planning to. But the robot says no. Kong decides to keep walking because there's nothing wrong, but an explosion happens suddenly. He is confused while the people around him run in the opposite direction of the fire. The young man wonders if that was really a fire. His body was equipped with a combat support artificial intelligence. He has increased agility in his eyes and an additional module in his ears. Besides his legs enhanced with strength, this level of fire was something he could end with a chance, preparing a strange but nothing happens and he just looks like a manon. Kong concludes that he doesn't have the freezing ray ability and Jian wonders if he could. But the protagonist questions what the easy way to put out the fire is, and the AI says it was to call the firefighters until it was a girl asking for help and people wonder what they should do. Kong asks how long it will take for the firefighters to arrive and Jian says it would take 4 minutes. There is a high probability that the fire will reach the top in 4 minutes, and if they don't rescue her now, Kong puts the mask on his face and tells him to find an entry route into the building. Jian says there were no usable paths in front and suggests a route where he can avoid the toxic gas and climb. The protagonist starts climbing on panels and surfaces at an incredible speed. People along the way comment that this guy was insane and wonder if he will save her. The protagonist tells her to check if there are any other survivors on other floors, and Jian hears no movement. Kong grabs onto a window, agreeing with him. People say he was like Spider-Man and was a climber or something like that. Jian warns that there is a risk of explosion right ahead of the protagonist. Kong hangs on to avoid the explosion, commenting that his grip saved him, and Jian tells him to thank her for the warning. The protagonist continues jumping through the building's floors. The little girl who was crying lifts her face. She calls her savior and raises her hands too, going into his arms, while Jian warns that it was dangerous and the fire was spreading faster than expected. The protagonist wonders if he was there to lose his life with her, and the girl is surprised. Kong thinks his body is enhanced, so if he holds her and jumps, he won't get hurt. And if his superhuman abilities are seen, his identity as an agent could be compromised. He may not be able to adapt to the situation after that. The protagonist suddenly notices a clothesline, wondering if he could use it to descend. And the little girl tries to deny the idea. And any direction was unsafe from now on. But he will tie the line to another building and walk across it. And asks if he was crazy to walk at that height. While the protagonist says he will handle the actions and Jian should assist with balance. When he connects the line, he could throw himself and will adjust the movements in detail. And the protagonist asks if he can't use his hand from the start. And that was beyond her reach. The AI says he was correct and should do it himself. But he would do it anyway and swings the rope in the air a few times. The rope is thrown far and catches on the ladder of another building. The protagonist says it was good and he could go, while the girl cries saying she can't do it. She screams when Kong grabs her because she thought he would throw her off the building. People outside wonder if he will really cross like that and should stack something underneath him. The girl asks to be saved while screaming for her mother. Because at this height, they've already done enough. The rope was breaking faster than expected. The protagonist wonders how much time they still have. The AI says at this rate, the rope will break before they reach the other side. Starting to snap, and the protagonist complains a bit. Jumping from up there with the girl and throwing her to the other building. The little girl lands on top while Jian warns that the rope was breaking. The protagonist falls from the building thinking about calculating. With his reflex, the guy grabs the rope. Then the protagonist starts jumping off the wall. Kong finally arrives at his destination and lands on the ground. He curses the situation, thinking he was almost finished. But she screams that he was a ghost upon noticing the protagonist. She wonders how he was still alive and if he was some kind of superhuman. The girl questions why they were talking so casually and if they knew each other. But Kong says she seemed new too. And he believed him because he was part of the strategic special forces. And the AI responds that it didn't expect to be flammable. Asking if he was the owner of that internet cafe that recently became famous. The protagonist wants to know how she found that out. As the day goes by, firefighters arrive and put out the fire in the building. Some people watch the protagonist save the girl on their phones. He had wrapped himself in the rope and crossed while holding someone. Wondering if he was a famous climber or a master jumper or something like that. And if they had a clue, it would be that trash bag. And if he had a plastic bag in hand, he would obviously drop it. It seemed they were using sauces for cooking. The name of the market is visible. And they could check the footage. While Young says he's not a criminal and they don't need to do that. Until he notices a call from his boss and asks what it was. While the detective asks why he answers the phone like that. Young says he was cutting his vacation short and that it was just a short circuit or gas leak there. The detective responds that he's not sure about that. But it wasn't the real problem since there was a fatality on the third floor. Young and the officer complain, thinking there wouldn't be any of that. But he says he understands and will start looking for the wanderer. The girl comes out saying that a hot bath was really amazing. And Kong says he saved her life. And now she was asking him to pay for her bath. And he should feel sorry because she has no parents and was alone with no place to stay at night. And she was serious because she was registered as a student and was planning to work part-time. Wondering why now she should survive. The girl asks about starting to work. Remembering that the internet cafe was hiring part-time employees and asks for help to get a job while Kong says goodbye. And the protagonist tells her to ask the boss. But anyway, he wants to know how she managed to recognize him. And she says she goes to the internet cafe all the time. She is a popular game streamer and doesn't have a computer at home. So she streams there. The protagonist wonders if she really thinks she's popular and good at games. At the internet cafe, Unseo calls for the protagonist asking why he was arriving so late. But she notices the girl and she introduces herself as Area. Unseo asks why he went to buy sauce but came back empty-handed. And the protagonist says he lost it while watching the fire. She jokes that he must have been so excited that he forgot and probably someone took it. Suddenly, Sheehan calls for his agent. Analyzing the visual data he gathered, there's a high chance many people filmed the. He could check articles on the internet to gather information. And he even found footage of the scene with news on a famous site. Based on their reactions, it was spreading quickly online. And Kong says there's no problem. And Jian will delete all videos. But the AI doesn't have those hacking abilities because it's a combat AI. And that hacking event was just for identity manipulation. But since she doesn't have attack capabilities now, she can't show him. Young finds himself in front of the internet cafe, saying there was a rope master at the internet cafe. Jian warns that he failed to find any information about the Earth Alliance again today. Kong says he was wondering if there was something connected with the year 2082 but. And there's a possibility they are hiding from them. But none of them are believable. The protagonist says it was indeed 2024. But Jian explains that his existence couldn't be explained with that technology. Kong reflects that no matter how much he looks at it, it would be strange. But he still wants to know what happened at the construction site yesterday. Jian only mentions that a person lost their life in that incident. The protagonist wonders if they lost someone and if it was his fault. But Jian completely denies it. Because the deceased was found in the room he passed while climbing the construction yesterday. And the protagonist asks if he didn't see him. Not something like improved vision. The protagonist asks what that means and if he could have been lifeless from the moment he arrived. And it wasn't just a fire but a premeditated murder. Until outside, Unkseo's voice questions about the police, saying yes. And it seemed like the card used in the purchase belonged to this place. Yoon questions if she bought those items from the bag. Unseo repeats about this thing while turning and calling for Kanjen, saying that the police officer brought the purchases he lost while watching the fire yesterday. He says the guy left it behind while watching. The protagonist thanks him for bringing his purchases. Yoon hands over the card and says if he has any leads about yesterday's incident, he should contact him. Unseo agrees and bids him farewell. Kong whispers that to catch the killer. The AI explains that it confirmed the identity. And Unseo questions if he has something to do outside because she wants to stay close to him. Unseo wonders if they could work together today. But the protagonist declines since he has things to do outside. The girl is puzzled for a few seconds, but says he is really hard to understand at the Seoul police station in the. Yoon says he is the owner of the bag from earlier and the protagonist confirms the detective tries to joke that he shouldn't. Kong says he didn't come for that, leaving the officer puzzled. The protagonist mentions that in yesterday's incident, he thought it wasn't. Yoon says that since there was a fatality, it was a normal suspicion. The detective questions if he has evidence because when a random civilian makes guesses, it complicates the. Kong says he didn't see anyone moving in the room while he was climbing the rope, leaving the detective completely shocked and Kong responds that it was because they hadn't asked about it. Yoon says he climbed like Spider-Man and carried someone on the rope to cross away from there. The detective takes a notebook and questions if he can explain again why he suspects it was a murder. In the major crimes team, Yoon notes that there were no movements in the room. The victim was already lifeless or was intoxicated by alcohol or illicit substances. So he was saying someone set the building on fire to cover up the murder. And Kong confirms because he noticed the survivors while climbing the building. A man near there asked if the forensic service was contacted. And it takes time to perform an autopsy, but the fire was very intense. Another woman says they only have the word that the fire was caused by a short circuit, and there were no. Wondering if they should make a sketch of the suspects now. Kong whispers to Jian wanting to know if he remembers the faces of the people he saw yesterday, and the robot says yes. Showing a video screen in front of the protagonist, who is impressed, he says he saw 4 people. The first was going outside while holding the phone in his right hand and had a bracelet on. His phone had a gray case, and his shirt was white, leaving Yoon impressed by his description. The protagonist thinks he was describing this in front of him. Yoon questions if he can help create a portrait and suggests doing it before the memory fades. But his portrait artist was out for a moment, and if he wants, he can wait a bit. But Kong says he will draw it, and he was somewhat decent at drawing, thinking Jian was really good at it. The protagonist prepares his pen and places it in front of the paper, asking if Jian can capture the 3 suspects. People notice the protagonist murmuring to himself, and it seemed a bit strange. Kong says he can now draw each of them, starting to scribble on the paper and taking a few minutes to finish. He gathers the information and says everything is ready, showing the drawing to the others while they wonder if the. He crumples the paper and says he just took a small break. The protagonist starts thinking while drawing, saying Jian should draw this, while the robot says it can. The detective in the white shirt questions if he really couldn't draw, and Yoon responds that he doesn't know. But a hypothetical light emanates from the protagonist's chair. Both turn and approach Kong, surprised to see the drawing. They are astonished and tell him to wait a minute, as it doesn't even make sense. The protagonist seems like a machine and a genius, wanting to know if he is a. Kong says only 3 people left the area before the fire started, and if the arsonist fled, it must be one. The chief knocks on the office door, announcing they will check their identities immediately and the next day at the internet cafe, the protagonist makes a perfect dish of food once again. Unxio says King's malatang was amazing, and his other friends say it was fantastic. The blonde reveals she heard about the fire at Ariam's house being caused by an arsonist, and Samwan says they already. And they found illicit substances with him too, while the protagonist thinks it hasn't been many days. All this was thanks to Ji-in's ability. With a noisy atmosphere at the dining table, Kong picks up his phone, answering a call from Detective Young, who says 2 of the people in the drawings were local residents, but the other was not from there, and his friends were the victims. They still need to investigate the exact cause, but also found illicit substances in his pockets. It seemed he came to collect money because of the substances, and when he couldn't, he took his client's life. He managed to track down the one selling drugs in advance on the scene, being actor Ne Jung-jian, and now Kong says this is getting bigger and bigger, and Young says it really seems like there won't be any vacations. But thanks to the drawing he made, they were able to proceed with things much faster, and question. The protagonist says as long as his identity isn't revealed, it's alright, and Detective Young calls. Kong responds that he was just doing his job, and his friends approach to try to listen to the conversation, asking what. Kong responds it was just some scribbles, and Ariam says he must be really bad to ask not to reveal his drawings. Suddenly, a noise in the PC area can be heard. Some people argue for having spilled ramen on the floor, and because of that, they lost the round in their game. Unseo says they did it again, and Songwon says the newbie was in charge of cleaning. Ariam thinks that since she cleaned the ramen, she could ask the boss for a bonus, but she bumps her head. The girl apologizes and asks if the gentleman is okay, but he suffers from his wrist. Ariam cries asking to call an ambulance, and Kong questions if it was really broken. Ji-in judges by the hand movement, saying there's a possibility of a fracture, and to check the injury, he needs to touch. Kong approaches, questioning if he can touch there, and the man allows the boss. When touched, he says it hurt while groaning in pain, and Ji-in checks the ligaments and joints, saying the. Then the protagonist informs that the bone was fine, and it was just a sprain, and he would. Songwon comments that his Hyung was really good at massages, and Unseo says she would get. Ji-in mentions it will take 24 hours to recover, and he should not exert himself to avoid getting worse. The man asks about his work, as he has to cook in Kongwon tomorrow, and it was his food truck. There was an emergency film shoot, and they called his food truck too, and Ariam suggests helping him. The man questions if she can cook, but the girl says she was only good at making. He sighs, responding that no matter how urgent it was, he couldn't serve instant noodles and needed someone. Looking at the protagonist pleadingly, Ji-in analyzes that the answer was obvious, and he should. Kong tries to refuse, saying he needs to work, but the boss says he will pay 300,000 won if he helps. The protagonist considers a bit upon hearing about the money, patting the hand of his new temporary boss. The man says he felt honored that he was going to help him. He heard that the internet cafe gained a reputation because of the amazing food, so he came there to check, so he thought he could learn something by eating there every day, but if Kong is going to help with the food. The protagonist reflects that he hadn't tracked this area, and it was time to move and investigate other regions, and The next morning, the truck speeds down the road. The man says Mr. Kong is a great driver and didn't think he could drive so smoothly. Today, he will make sure to impress the actors with a delicious meal and thanks for the help. The man comments that the news exploded yesterday where an actor was caught at a party full of illicit. That movie was going to be released in about a week, and Kong questions if they can really release it. The man denies it because no one wants to see a movie with an actor addicted to substances, and now they were. He was grateful to be able to work on it, but the atmosphere was very intense, and they were filming all the scenes that had the actor. Kong questions why not delay the release, and the man responds that it was a special situation because it was director Sun Tae-min, who is one of the best directors for romance films in Korea, so it will be fine. Tae-min smokes the rest of his cigarette, saying everything was ruined. He repeats that he doesn't like this, looking downcast. His assistant questions if they should film again, and Taemin responds that there is no more time and no choice but. All because of that damn bag of illicit substances. If he gets his hands on him, he would take his life, shouting for everyone in the studio to hear, and a girl. His assistant advises eating and calming down a bit because the team was tired too. Taemin freaks out, questioning if he thinks he could eat now, and if the movie fails, he would be in debt and they should send them away. But upon tasting the food, he asks why it tastes so good. Wanting to know if they put substances in the food while Taemin tells him to stop talking about. The original food truck chef hurt his wrist, so another chef was helping. That mountain setting was great too, and director Sun should stay positive and relax his shoulders a bit. Honestly, it was lucky that none of the other actors got into trouble, but suddenly a voice shouts Tae. They both turn shocked at the bad luck. Something falls to the ground, and people run to the stuntman. He apologizes to the director, and says he should have been more careful. The director orders to call 119 and questions if there was anyone there who could provide first aid. But seeing that there was no one, he thinks it was over. Cursing the world while the truck chef says this movie was cursed, and questions if Kong and could handle. The protagonist wonders if the man's ankle wasn't sprained and approaches the stuntman. Telling him to take a look at his injury, Kong says he will only provide first aid, but he needs to send him to the. The protagonist calls on Ha team member, leaving the girl confused. Taemin asks her to quickly get it, and the girl agrees, walking while thinking about what he called her. Sure, Noon Ha was an actress, although a supporting one. She hands over the bandages, and the protagonist thanks her, leaving the girl sulking in the corner. Jin says the injured actor had a severe sprain in his ankle, but it wasn't as bad as they had described. Unha asks if everything is okay, and the stuntman confirms. Because it hurt a lot when he got injured, but now he feels his bones are in place, and. But the protagonist says filming is still impossible. He had finished the temporary treatment, but it will be difficult to walk until he's fully recovered, and the assistant is. Taemin questions how they will find someone with a body and face similar to Kim Yoo-chan, and bring him to the middle. And when he arrives, they will have already missed the release date, and will go bankrupt. Kim Yoo-chan says he can film the action scenes himself, the director says he's fragile, and if he injures his ankle, maybe they can film his face with a mask and sunglasses, and maybe that will work. Wondering if God can help in this torment because he doesn't mind paying double or triple. Kong just warns that the person sent by the heavens had arrived. He was just joking, but needs to think if he can do it. Wonha says there's no chance because no matter how desperate they are, it wouldn't work because he's just an ordinary boss. Taemin tells them to wait a minute, unable to hear. But now that he thinks about it, he really did look a bit like Kim Yoo-chan. Taemin asks if he has any physical skills, and the protagonist confirms. The director wants to know if he could help a little because they would just apply some makeup, and he can fix it with CGI. It was a triple payment for this, and the director orders to start filming immediately while Wonha-chan in the scene where they were filming. Kim Yoo-chan, who was the male protagonist, saves his supporting actress, Shin Eun-ha. The original villain in this scene was the author who was a substance user, and that's why they were filming everything again. Asking him to listen carefully and stay with the actor to practice a bit because he's going outside to smoke some cigarettes. Kim Yoo-chan guides the protagonist, saying that here he swings his arm and hits the chin along with an Easter egg. Kong questions if it won't look strange if all the movements are planned, and the supporting actors say it. Jihan explains they didn't need to film that way because he has some skills used for training manuals and requires. Saying that instead, the three could attack as if it were real. They should act as if they want to fight him, and he will handle it appropriately to make it look more realistic on camera. Wonha hears the lines about it only working if the movie does well, and the success depends on them. Thinking about what he knows about filming because he doesn't know what he's talking about. Kong approaches director Taemin, asking if he could film in one go without cuts. He was planning to go straight to action, and that way, they will save a lot of time, and Taemin says if he can do it. Kong tells him to trust him because it was the power of a triple payment, then warns that he will go straight. Taemin is shocked by this but opens a slightly hesitant smile. Thinking that his director's instinct was telling him he was a trustworthy person, the filming. Asking for help while the villains approach in that scene, they say they will torment her, and she must give. The protagonist suddenly kicks the door. He jumps from side to side while the villains wonder how this guy found them. The villains reflect that he told them to attack for real, but they still had to act as if they. One of the actors runs towards him. Jin says he would guide him to where he could dodge. He would mark the punches in advance, telling the protagonist to go left, and thus he. Another villain advances and Kong goes to the right. His body was reacting before the instruction came. Jin says that at this point, he can grab the opponent by the collar to get the best camera angle. The protagonist holds there, and the villain thinks this wasn't in the script. Kong throws him up and strikes his body consecutively. He asks to just continue with the script while screaming in fear. The last villain wonders if this was in the script, and wants to know why the director wasn't calling for. Then he advances towards him while screaming and tries a punch that the protagonist dodges, showing his defined. Striking the villain's head and kicking him up right after, the protagonist grabs a baton and hits him one last time. From director Taemin and his assistant, Wonha Kim Yoo-chan and the other villains. They were all shocked and mentally calling the protagonist a crazy bastard. He says he came to save her. The girl stammers a bit and asks if he will let her live while thinking this wasn't her script. The assistant cuts the scene with his clapperboard. He denies it, saying he told him to act as if he was hitting and not to hit for real, and after this incident. Taemin thinks he was too blind to film the movie and wonders what he did, saying he should have stopped him while a villain. Nay gone. Taemin is completely surprised that he got up. The villains question what he did because they were shocked since they weren't hurt even though they were hit. Honestly, they were scared because it seemed like he was really hitting them and want to know. Taemin wonders what they were talking about and if they were saying he didn't hit them, and the assistant calls for and about the people he had hurt, but the three villains respond that they were completely fine. The assistant is puzzled upon hearing this, asking if they were all sure about it. And the villain replies that he doesn't know how, but one thing was certain. It was like a cushion or something, and it felt more like sliding than hitting. The assistant asked how, and the protagonist responds that it was exactly that. It was like sliding sideways on a cliff ski. The man turns to actor Kim, as he had been hit in the neck and even flew, questioning if he was hurt. But he replies that he wasn't hit and just dodged his neck, and most of the. The assistant says his camera clearly filmed him being beaten, but they weren't feeling pain. But the director puts his hand on his shoulder, saying they can wrap up for the day. And that's why he didn't stop filming all this time. Now they must quickly review the footage and check if they captured it correctly. A few minutes later, they say it was better than expected, and even the expression. Kim Yoo-chan says all the action was perfectly captured, and it was expected from the director. While another man says instead of saying he did well, they say it like this. But this actor was calculating the camera positions and moving with them. He just followed with the camera, and every angle became perfect in all of them. Kim Yoo-chan is shocked that he moved according to each camera from start to finish. Kim looks back and asks if his part was over now, while the director responds yes and was impressed. Thanks to him, it looked like a good Hollywood action movie, and Kim replies he was happy it turned out well. Taemin says everyone should take Kong in as inspiration and move on to the next scene and asks if Chul was okay. The professional actor says he acted really well and wants to know which agency he was from, and the Yoonha gets angry, wondering if Yechin is a fool because this wasn't even acting. These guys wouldn't get hurt for filming, and anyone could see how he hit them, and they were about to cry in pain. If the script told him to hit her too, Kong would have beaten the girl like any other. The protagonist passes by and waves at her. Yoonha wonders why he was staring at her, and if he read her mind or something. She suddenly calls. The protagonist raises his eyes to the upper floor. Yoon says the source of the strange noise was identified, and in a few moments, the debris will fall. When this structure breaks, the fragments will fly at the actors, and Kong thinks it was a sudden collapse. It would occur in 5 seconds, and the protagonist starts to move. Kong grabs Yechin's shirt, throwing him away while the actor asks what was happening. Yoonha freaks out as there were only 3 seconds left. She asks to be saved, and the protagonist holds her in his arms, advancing with a stick in hand. At the mark of just 1 second, the other people in the studio wonder what was happening because the front part of the Kong manages to deflect some debris with his stick. Yoonha calls for her mother, and asks to be saved while crying. The protagonist mentally tells her to be quiet and keeps hitting. Yoon gives him a warning, because the structure would collapse on a large scale, with the smoke starting to dissipate. Taemin and all the other actors were completely stunned. They ask if Sununha was okay, and please, she should say the answer was yes. The girl was collapsed in the protagonist's arms. Screaming to be saved while Kong responds that the girl was still alive, questioning if she was very surprised, and now he was trying to throw her too. The girl notices the whole place where they were. Wondering what had happened there, and Kong responds that he doesn't know, and it was probably. Yoonha looks sideways, because he had saved her and Yechin from being crushed by those metal bars. Kong questions if she could get down now that she understands the situation. She is thrown away, questioning how he dares. Yechin approaches, saying that he suddenly threw him, and he thought he had a grudge against him, but the actor says that even though it seemed like he was thrown hard, he was completely fine, and the director. And Yechin responds that Kong had saved him in an instant. Yoonha looks at the protagonist before responding, seeing him turn until he looks into her eyes. She responds that everything was fine and thinks that maybe he wasn't a bad guy. Taemin thanks for that and thinks it was close, because if those metal bars had hit one of the actors, and if an actor suffers that because they rushed the construction, especially with the substance scandal, their movie. So Kong Yin was their real superhero. The assistant calls for Taemin and says they need to fix the studio, and the director responds wanting to know if it. A cameraman says they managed to capture the scene perfectly, and the two question what that means. He explains that he rolled the camera behind the scenes and managed to capture everything on tape, and they were. Seeing the recording of Kong running with Yoonha on his back and deflecting the beams too. Everyone is incredulous while watching it. They celebrate because it looked like a Hollywood movie, and they got a scene like that without even planning it. Taemin says this will be huge, and it was the birth of an iconic scene while the assistant. This scene was too good to just throw away, but it was still an accident, and not a planned scene. Questioning what would happen if people found out it was a real accident, and Taemin responds that they would be very hated. But no one got hurt, and they can use this to boost the movie, and if a problem like this arises, they're lawyers. The assistant questions if Kanjen, who is in the footage, asks not to use it. Taemin runs towards his savior, calling his name. Then he questions about the recent accident, first expressing his gratitude for saving Jia and mentally notes that rescuing civilians was part of her mission, and Kong responds that he just did what needed to be done. Taemin asks about the scene where he rescued them, as they accidentally filmed it, and it looked great. He even offers to credit him in the final scene, but Jia and sees it could interfere with the mission. She changes her mind, and Kangen agrees to let them use his image in the film. The manager approaches Unha and asks if she is okay, as she seemed really down earlier, and the girl confirms. Looking to her side where Kong is standing, she notices a scratch on his back, asking if he got hurt because his back. Unha thinks she was almost crushed by a metal bar, but he saved everyone, without even getting a. Blushing, she thanks the protagonist, and Kangen says he was just doing his job. The girl shouts that she wasn't a crew member but an actress, and the protagonist replies that it was a joke. But since his work was done, he will return to the food truck, and Taemin agrees while thanking him once more. Saying the food there was also amazing, and he seemed young but talented. Unha asks where he usually works, and the assistant replies that it's at an internet cafe. The girl asks if he won't return after helping them today, and Taemin says he will ask him to help. With this guy helping, the movie would be the best action film, and Unha calls for the director, because her movie was. Taemin responds that the genre doesn't matter. If they cut all scenes with that and replace them with action, they will solve all the problems. The assistant says they are running out of time and will hire a stunt double quickly, and Taemin questions why. He just saw Kong in calculating all movements in real time, and the assistant agrees. Taemin says time is what they desperately need, and no one can solve this except Kong. No acting license was needed anyway, as Kong was much better than Kim Hee-chan earlier. The assistant questions about the food, as he heard Kong and only came to replace the chef because of his injury. Taemin responds that there's no need to talk anymore, and will handle this problem himself. Running while calling Kong in to start, and the assistant wonders if the movie will. Outside, the protagonist comments that this place seemed fine and suddenly collapsed. In the middle of filming and where an actor was, which was a bit suspicious, Jian analyzes the visual data and estimates. Kong says he thought the same, and someone set this up beforehand while Jin notes that several medals went towards Unha, and it could be. Someone was targeting the actress, or even the film itself, wanting it to fail. Taemin runs to the protagonist, asking if they can talk for a moment, holding his hand and begging to save his film. The director explains the whole situation of the film, and Jian says the geography of the area was. And the information value was very low, while Kong says he has to work in Seoul. Taemin says starting tomorrow, they will move all additional filming to Seoul. Kong tries to say he also needs to work, but the director responds that he doesn't need to worry, he will ensure the payment is solid, and the company wasn't in a position to save money now, while Jen advises him to accept. The protagonist agrees, asking to read the script, and the negotiation takes place. Sun Taemin, who had slowed down due to his frustration, regained his speed and showed. Although all additional scenes filmed in the collapsed field were cancelled, the best scenario began to take shape. In the morning, the actors and team were advancing to film, and in the afternoon, thanks to Kong, Akira approaches the drift area. Manager Kim from Tikho Entertainment runs towards the studio, calling out director Sun Taemin's name. Since if they release the film in its original form, they will become nothing, and the film will be. He knows they can't delay the release date, and his company has already secured most of the theaters using. Taemin tells him to just trust him as he will solve all their problems, and Kim tells him to. He should just say how things are going to report to the superiors, and the director says he is doing it this way. Starting today, it will be a romantic comedy with action, and the manager questions if he is. They were working on it, and will show him during dinner later, but someone else opens the door. The director questions who he was, because it was crazy to kick the door during a recording like. Manager Kim is startled when the person enters, bowing to his boss while saying he didn't expect to see him in. Taemin quickly recognizes President Lee Tae-hoo from the Ticho company. The president approaches, saying he didn't want to come there because he doesn't want to burden a filming location, but the manager says it was a mistake while they were working, and Tae-hoo responds that it was his department's job to. Wanting to know how long he will continue helping that damn drug addict? A little girl runs into the studio. She asks if her dad was angry, being Lee Min-ji, Tae-hoo's daughter, and A. Min-ji says she heard his angry voice, so she followed him, and Tae-hoo responds that he wasn't angry, but it was. The director goes to talk to the little girl, and she treats him well. Tae-ho questions if the director can finish all filming and editing in a week and give a clear answer. He confirms and will do better than the original. The president says it was expected from a veteran Chumoro director who does a great job. Taemin mentions someone named Kong and who is incredible at fighting and has Hollywood-level skills for. The president says if the director says so, he must be very impressive, and it seemed like he recruited him in a hurry. Taemin points to the food truck. A light illuminates the president's face as he looks at the protagonist. He was wearing a mask on his face while turning a perfect pot of rice. Tae-ho says then the master of fried rice was the martial arts director Na Kang-en. Taemin confirms, and the president questions why he was cooking, but the director just says it was because he came with the. The president is completely shocked to receive the information, because then director Taemin was saying, in this urgent situation, he was bringing an amateur to save it. Taemin questions what he was talking about, and the president says the film was cursed anyway, so he. The director tries to say that's not it, and if he sees results, he will understand. Tae-ho says he must send all production expenses without leaving out a cent. The director even runs after him intending to reverse the decision, but Tae-ho tells the manager to get all receipts and check every detail. Near the food truck, Min-ji shouts that it was really delicious and wants to know what. Kan explains it was called a mix, and the little girl complains that the name was strange. The protagonist says he made a lot for the team, so she can eat as much as she wants. Min-ji complains she can't eat much because her mom said she would gain weight if she did, and Kan says she could. She responds that there's no way because she's the lead actress in this film, so she needs to take care of her appearance. Even as a child actress, if she plays the same role, she can be the protagonist, and Kan says he was right. She asks the protagonist to make more snacks later, but the young man responds that he would like to, but they will be. Min-ji suggests grabbing some now and hiding them in her father's car for later, and Kan suggests. The girl takes out a cell phone and gets excited, asking him to give his number to talk to him later, and she. Snack guy, and Kan agrees. He knew that director Taemin was a perfectionist who rarely gets satisfied with the results, but Tae-ho agrees and says he will see what they filmed, approaching the computer and going completely. Tae-ho tells him to wait a minute and wants to know when he managed to add the CGI, and even added choreography. Taemin responds that they didn't have time for any CGI, and it was the normal footage without. The actor calculated every angle where he could be captured on camera and was moving accordingly. The director confirms because the construction had collapsed but not Kan and saved them in the moment of crisis. Tae-ho says he should apologize to director Sun for his earlier comments. He felt sorry for the misunderstanding, but Taemin responds that he understands and if he hadn't, both decide to go thank the food guy. Kan finishes cooking a little more snacks. The protagonist says he just did it, but the president says he wasn't there for the snacks. He introduces himself as President Lee Tae-ho of the investment company Ticho, and it seems Kan says he was just doing his job and mostly for money. The president comments on his martial arts and asks what the food was. The protagonist responds that it was sweet popcorn and he should give it a try. Tae-ho thinks he ate a lot during his military service and really didn't like it but has to thank Mr. Kan. Becoming completely shocked when he tastes the food. He shouts that it was unbelievable and tasted like a pancake with a very magical flavor. His daughter would absolutely love something like that. The president says he hopes his daughter thanked him properly, calling Min-ji to eat snacks with her father. The president wonders where his daughter went and Kan is surprised, questioning Ji and where Min-ji was. The system responds that it couldn't locate her in the recorded footage. Wondering if she could be inside the building but there was no sign of Min-ji nearby. The young man's phone rings with the little girl calling. He decides to answer and the president questions how he knew his daughter's number. so Khan explains he got the number earlier. Taeho approaches calling for Mr. Nakangan, questioning why he seems so upset. The protagonist continues walking around there. But the robot says the sound was different. The analysis results enter the protagonist's mind. The sound of air came from a light object trapped in an outer layer and the sound of reinforced plastic pressed with metal echoing. Khan mentally repeats these clues, thinking that if it was a confined space it would be a car. Elsewhere, some men discuss who kidnapped someone and leaves them with a phone. But the other didn't know. He had taken the girl in a hurry. And the boss says the fact that he broke it was suspicious in case they called again and didn't answer. Questioning who she called, and the man responds that it was someone called Snack Guy. In any case, they should leave the car quietly and get out before anyone notices. Nakangan, asking what was wrong. After receiving a call from his daughter, he became serious and said nothing, questioning why he was making. Jean analyzes that the individual rescue mode was activated, noticing then the girl's backpack and snack were in front. Khan looks coldly and starts running while the president just shouts his name, falling silent upon noticing the. He says it was his daughter's and raises his head, wondering what it could be. Then he informs his boss that someone was coming this way and the man shouts that he was in. Because he was reporting this calmly and should speed up the car soon. The car moves and Jean says it was definitely the enemy. The AI says it was good equipment for dealing with vehicles and he should use the plate. Khan grabs it with his hand, using his strength to lift it from the ground. Then he advances forward as fast as he can. The kidnappers comment that that guy was running after them. Their boss wonders if he was insane because he thought he could capture a car just by running and sometimes someone. Only in this case, he should speed up the car even more. The driver tells his boss that he was done for. That man says he probably got exhausted and collapsed, so they shouldn't worry about him and just keep driving. But the protagonist leaps from the ground, advancing with his superhuman speed. The kidnapper's boss is left speechless upon seeing this. He spins the plate in his hand with immense dexterity, embedding it in the middle of the car and making the. They want to try to figure out what the hell that was and how this bastard got there. The boss orders to drive and knock that lunatic down soon. Khan tells Giant to find a way to stop the car and the artificial intelligence tells him to look at the bumper. Because if he pierces that place vertically, the engine would stop immediately. Khan removes the plate from inside the car and holds it even tighter, embedding it directly into the car's engine. The kidnappers look at him in fear, calling that man a lunatic while Khan just stares at them. The boss says this guy wouldn't let them leave and should hit the brakes to throw him off. The driver just obeys the order, throwing the protagonist off the top of the car. Minji cries, afraid of losing the snack guy. The people watching from afar are shocked, calling for Minji and Mr. Nakangan. If he goes like that and acts rudely, he would lose his life, but the protagonist performs, looking directly at the kidnappers while Giant says he successfully conducted the vehicle's brakes. The driver says that guy had been thrown far away, but nothing happened. Then his boss orders to speed up the car and hit him so they can get out of the place. But their car doesn't move, and the boss gets furious, asking what he was doing. Then he notices the damn guy was aiming at the car's engine from the start. He starts hitting one of his subordinates, ordering not to just watch and go take that guy's life, because he will. Both leave and call Khan a bastard, wanting to know what the hell he was. But the protagonist just responds that his identity was being Batman. They don't understand the reference, and the protagonist continues advancing, saying it was a name from outside Korea, and then kicks one of them. The man is thrown far away thanks to the force of the impact, groaning in pain while the driver approaches, and the protagonist goes to the car. He draws a knife, saying it was too fast for his eyes to follow. Khan strikes him on the chin using his heel, backing away and maintaining his fighting stance. Then quickly walks towards the car. Minji tries to speak but had her mouth covered. The boss asks if he thought he was scared just because he had subdued everyone at once. But the protagonist touches the glass, telling Minji not to worry because he will save her. Khan asks what the plan is to subdue the kidnapper, and John suggests jumping into the car and persuading. The protagonist decides it would be better to lure him out and deal with it because Minji. And John tells him to move away from the car. To make the enemy lower his guard, they need to go as far away as possible, and the enemy won't come until. She recommends a distance of 15 meters, and the boss wonders why he was retreating and if that means. Then he thinks he needs to get out of there quickly before these guys reach him. The boss opens the door, cursing the world, while shouting for them to get a car and placing a knife near the little girl. They shouldn't dare call the police if they want the child, Taeju cries while shouting his daughter's name. Then he runs towards them, shouting that he will give the car. But if he touches a finger on Minji, he will destroy his 10th generation. The boss thinks that's it, and with a sick smile accepts, telling him to bring the car himself while the subordinates wonder if they won't call the police, but decide to call secretly. Taeju gets into a luxury car thinking of his daughter, saying that daddy will come to her, and she should just wait a little longer. The man drives towards the enemy. Ji warns that providing transportation for the enemy means increasing the chances of him escape. Taeju opens the door saying he brought the car and was there, but he shouldn't touch a finger on his daughter. Minji cries while calling for her father mentally. The kidnapper orders the president to put his hands up and approach calmly, while breathing heavily and pointing. Taeju moves away from the car and the killer keeps going, but the president realizes what he had done and starts running. The kidnapper orders not to come because he would really cut her and not hesitate to do it. Khan is surprised to see that with blood splattering from afar. Taeho and Minji are shocked when they see the kidnapper fall to the ground and drop his knife. Khan had thrown something from afar, thinking it was a direct hit. Jian analyzes that the enemy was hit using long-range equipment, a stone. The president runs towards his daughter and hugs her, while removing the tape from the girl's mouth, and she breaks down crying. With the sunset, the employees comment that those bastards had broken ribs, injured jaws, and one of them was hit in the head. Everyone was in terrible condition, especially the one hit by the stone. It looked like a fracture and they should call an ambulance to send him to the hospital. Taeho approaches questioning why send them to the hospital first as if they did something good. His daughter, who was almost kidnapped, should be treated first, and the employee says they can't leave him like that because it. Minji calls her father and asks if the snack guy will be arrested and turns to Khan questioning if he will go to. But the protagonist tells her not to worry because just as her father saved her, he will save him too. Ji warns that if he planned to escape the police, now is the time, and thinks that if he is smart, he will. But thinks that saying the father saved her in front of Minji made him seem better than he should. Nakanghan was the hero who saved his daughter, and even if these guys lose their lives, he was innocent. The man says they need evidence, and the president responds that they were on the mountain and there was no way there could be. Suddenly director Tae Min appears behind him saying that he has it. There were the recordings of his film, and he has something much more valuable than camera footage showing everyone the video where it was true that the three threatened the child and Mr. Nakanghan. The employee questions how he managed to film it, and Taemin responds that the place was full of cameramen. Nakongdan was the hero who saved everyone and was absolutely innocent, with Ji sighing as she ends the. Taeho approaches, saying that even if the head of the kidnappers ends up lifeless, there would be no punishment for Mr. Nakongdan. If someone tries to punish him even after watching the footage, it will show how competent his public relations team was. Kam walks away, saying it was close to dinner time and they shouldn't worry because he won't run away. Later at the food truck, the protagonist prepares a chocolate cake. Mijin asks if he made it, and Kam responds that he knows she doesn't eat much but she should try a little. Ji explains that tactical desserts boost allies' morale and the protagonist urges her to try it because it. Taeho says his Mijin was too shocked earlier to eat a snack and asks if it was good. Then he begs for a piece, saying it was better than the cookies before. The president questions how he did it because he wants to try making it at home with Mijin. But the food truck chef says a normal person can't replicate it. First, they need a lot of strength to mix and combine the ingredients at that speed. Questioning if he is a professional chef and if that was the explanation. But Kam responds that he works at a lawn house that serves food. The president is completely astonished until an angry voice from afar catches his attention. She yells Taeho's name, asking how he dared. Mijin slaps his face, saying her daughter was almost kidnapped and he was there. She questions if Minji was okay and if she got hurt anywhere and notices she was dirty. Taeho says he knows it will seem strange. But there was a reason for it. The wife continues hitting him even without him saying anything, and Taemin comments that they were seeing many sides. His manager tells him to calm down because many people were watching this now. She will take care of him quietly without any police or witnesses, and Taeho pleads to be spared. Mijin thanks the protagonist for saving her daughter. Kam responds that it was only natural, and the woman says everyone who saw the video talked about how he saved her. The young man had jumped in front of a car, stopped it, and fought with an armed guy, and Ji comments that the agent. Kam responds that it was normal, and Mijuan is impressed while the little girl runs to him, telling him not to forget he promised. Mijuan informs her husband that she will go home first since their daughter has homework, and Taeho responds that. After they are alone, the president says that if it weren't for Mr. Nakongdan, he and his wife would be in despair now, thanking him once again because he will treat him much. Kam decides to accept, saying it seemed like a good offer. Suddenly, another person calls for President Taeho, asking him to go over there, and Yunha sighs behind the so the rumor that he works at the lawn house was a lie. Kam denies it, and she asks where it was because she should get the address and phone number. The protagonist types on the phone and saves it with his name. The girl thanks him and blushes a little, saying for him not to get the wrong idea because she didn't ask for his number. Kam looks back with a blank face, thinking he didn't know the lawn house's number anyway, and the girl says if he looks that among all the people there, who the heck posted the video of his daughter's rescue on YouTube, he gathers everyone from. Manager Kim approaches, saying the head of public relations was calling. He asks if Minji was okay, and the president responds that it was clear because, as he saw, the hero had saved her. The chief responds that it was difficult to stop since it was spreading across the entire internet, and not. Taeho orders to find the original leaker, and the chief responds that he will. The director shouts that he would spare the life of whoever confesses, and his assistant tries to calm him down. Taeho calls his wife, who was in the car, and answers quickly. She questions what he did this time, but the president tells her to listen without being angry, because it was about the rest. But she shouldn't worry because they will find the one who leaked it, and Mi Young responds that it was. The president is left speechless upon hearing this. Mi Young explains that earlier when she saw the video, she got excited, saying that the snack guy. She said the hero needed to be widely known, and Mi Young agreed with her, questioning where the problem was until director Taeho tries to calm him and asks him to listen, but the director says he couldn't count on him. The next day at the internet cafe, the girls comment that this was crazy. It looked like a promotional video for that movie, and if someone jumped on a car like that, they would lose their life. Aneseo invites Ariam to watch the movie when it comes out, and the girl agrees, while Song Hwan asks. Ariam says that anyway, that guy looked like Kong En. Aneseo responds that the quality was too low to see clearly, but the body shape was similar, but there was no way he would appear in. Her friend agrees, saying that even if it was Kong En, it would be too much. But anyway, she wants to know when he will return because they miss him. The protagonist wears a mask and a cap to hide his face, landing several kicks on some actors playing the. He hides behind a post to dodge the shots, then advances at a surprising speed and strikes with a kick to the face of. Kong heads towards Unha. The girl looks at him with a bright expression, and the director cuts at that moment, switching the protagonist with. Thus, the movie starts once again, and the actor questions if the poor princess. The director cuts and thanks everyone for their hard work, commenting that Kong En's action scene was perfect, but when Unha looked at Yuchan, her eyes were different, and her face. Taemin runs towards the protagonist, thanking him because the filming flowed quickly, then asks if everything was okay for today, and Taeho. The protagonist questions about the status of Minji's rescue video, and the video had been exposed internationally, and news was circulating, but strangely people thought. Taeho questions how he thought a father would feel when the rescue video of his daughter was the most viewed in the world, and anyway, she knew Unha was a supporting actress, but the script changed, and now she was one of the protagonists, and Taeho says he would like to buy some drinks for the protagonist today. Unha and Yuchan had worked hard too, so they all go together, and the director will stay there editing. Jen asks the protagonist to accept because it was the promise from before, and Kong agrees. The artificial intelligence comments that it seemed to be a very expensive place. The drinks were good too, so he should drink as much as he wants, and Jin comments that this robot was. Unha grabs a bottle of drink asking for King's glass, while Yuchan says he will. Both argue over who will pour the protagonist's drink because they both owed him. Meanwhile, President Taeho fills his glass, and Kong thanks him. The president starts to tell that he always dreamed of being a film director. Since high school, he was around the industry and even filmed some independents a few times, but they had all. After making many bad films, he realized he had no talent for the area, and his father Yuchan asks him to stay positive because he still had success in the industry, and Taeho says that if the film had failed, his company would be in danger, and Kong says maybe it was because he didn't work. Taeho says his father owned a military equipment production company known in the field. His father had given some funds to the company and would never sell their help, but to tell the truth, he invested 10 billion. Unha questions this, and Taeho says if the film fails, he will beg his father for help, but he will hit him. She is shocked by this because he was over 40, and the president responds that those funds should never be. Yuchan says the man was ambitious, and the president questions if it makes sense for the. That was the reason he bet and invested by himself, just thinking about that dependent who got on his nerves. They question the name of his father's company, and if it was known, hearing the name Iron Chi Gong Engineering, Jian. They produced combat equipment used in some regions in 2082, and their data include. He questions this, and Jian explains it was old but was the main combat means in some places, and used products were traded, so something would be strange. Because of the substance incident, the construction collapse, and then Ji's kidnapping, everything. Taeho asks why Mr. Kong Na-in seems so irritated, and if something was wrong. The protagonist says it wasn't him and had a problem with Mr. Lee, because if his film fails, the funds will run out, and he can't put his father's company at risk. Taeho says only if he loses his funds, but he will tell his father, and they will be safe, but I don't think the situation was so simple now. He had been suspicious for a few days, and on the first day, this studio in Kanwon collapsed, someone had broken in. Taeho says he heard him mention it, and the police conducted an investigation at the studio, and it was analyzed. They will probably say there is a possibility of sabotage, but there is no definitive evidence. And a week ago, the lead actor was arrested at a party with substances, and that. When the arson investigation was done in Seoul, the police accidentally discovered it.
Kan agrees because the arsonist incident was not in someone's plans, because they invaded the. Tieho had to film the movie in a week, but if it hadn't happened, something could occur.
The incident happened before the film was released. If they had waited to release the party report, everything bad would have happened.
Yutua says his film wouldn't be able to pay the cinemas and would be fired after the release.
Kang says when the film fails, the plan would be to ask his father for help, and Tieho says yes. The protagonist suggests if it's someone's plan, and when the film fails, his father's company would. Iron Qigong Engineering would be in a situation where it can help Lee's company, and even if that's the case, he will use all his connections, and if he has to sell the company to keep his father's funds safe. The man is shocked to hear this. He continues that Mr.
Tieho would have to share his funds, thinking he wouldn't just lose 10 billion.
But if his daughter were kidnapped, he would handle the collapse, and all his connections would be trapped.
Yutua says the reason people kidnapped, and Kong continues it was for Mr.
Lee to lose his sanity and make it easier to mark the funds.
Tieho says he didn't plan to go to the studio that day, and Kong mentions that he went there anyway. The president agrees, and Kong says that the person who collapsed the studio knew Mr. Lee and Min Ji that day. Wonha questions if he was saying someone collapsed the studio to hurt her, and Kong says they were. If someone got hurt, there would be chaos, making it easier to kidnap Min Ji. The girl says that if they investigate the kidnapping, they might find the person behind it, and Kong says it can't be handled easily. At the police station, they complain that this bastard doesn't know anything. The three thugs were sitting in the chair. That policeman says he heard about a kidnapped girl who was the daughter of a billionaire. But since the mountain area has no footage, they couldn't capture him and question who spread the rumor. His colleague responds that no one knows clearly, and just said someone from above had ordered it. They must investigate this immediately because there was no footage in the area. Back at the restaurant, Kong says this scenario would be if the film fails, but they should take it as an. And Wonha says that not only with action, but it was amazing for writing scenarios. They joke about who will be the protagonist in this film, but Tieho seemed completely apprehensive. A few hours later, they finish drinking and wonder if they should get more drunk. Yuchan says goodbye to the gentleman, and Wonha accompanies him.
Kong thinks he almost got it right this time and can't bet the iron she got on company's funds again. They must be strong not to try something so dangerous. But Wonha suddenly calls for the protagonist, asking if he wants to drink once. Kong agrees to drink with the three, and the girl gets annoyed with this. In another room, the father calls his son a damned idiot, because he dared to use company funds to make a film. Being the CEO of Chaolin Engineering, Lee Young-min, Tieho responds that the film won't fail. And if it's vital, the company will grow and enhance the corporation's image. His brother Tieho Sung says the mood was bad, and he really was like that. The president comments that the company developed an incredible product and exported well, and Tieho Sung. Their funds were solid, and it seemed like everyone gave up irritating Tieho, saying that one of these might be the people behind Min Ji's kid. One of the companies might have made a film, but brokers wanted to take over his. First, they must fix things and ask if he's sure the film will succeed, and Tieho confirms. It had turned out much better than the original, and Young Min questions if it was thanks to the doubled action. The president responds that it was thanks to Mr. Nakangan, and thus they can film the movie faster, and it was all because of him. Tieho Sung says he was just good at praising actors, and the president says he wasn't ordinary. Young Min says that if his company was doing well, they could attack someone coming from outside, and Tieho Sung agrees. The CEO calls for his son, warning that if he touches the funds again, he will disinherit him, thinking it was thanks to Mr. Nakangan. Tieho Sung tells him to get the action actor and give him a role in as many films as possible, and if he says Mr. Nakangan was already at a level beyond where he could offer a role.
At the internet cafe, young CEO receives an invitation to the premiere of the film called Sunny Day.
She responds that she's not sure and doesn't have time today, but Kang tells her not to worry if she's busy. Ariam questions about her, and Sung Hwan does the same. The girl says she was fine, and newcomers started working with him and cleaning robots through a. The promotional video they saw recently was the film Mr. Kong had participated in, and that's what happened. No wonder it looks so similar to Kong in that promotional video, and since it was the debut work, they will. The three say it was right, and they will maintain loyalty while Kong comments not to skip the part-time work. At the cinema in the city of Seoul, some reporters ask Mr. Yuchan to take a look as well, showing the thumbs up to the spotlights. Shernoon Ha to give a heart, and the girl does. The group comments that there were many celebrities there to see the movie premiere.
Unseo questions why Kong was standing there, and the young man says his face didn't appear in the movie. Yuchan smiles upon noticing the protagonist from afar. Jian informs the agent about it.
He continues to get it right, and Ariam suddenly hits the protagonist while shouting, asking if he saw it because Unha notices it was the protagonist and decides to speak casually, waving at him, but Song Hwan thinks it's for. They continue arguing, and Kong questions where Unseo was, seeing that she was around there. Ariam asks if Unseo was trying to get an autograph, and Song Hwan approaches, speaking to the deity.
Kong questions if the two knew each other, and both confirm. Unha questions how he knew Mr.
Kangin, and Unseo responds that her uncle owns the internet cafe, and he works there. The blonde says they knew each other but had different last names. They had lived in the same neighborhood when they were children, and knew all her embarrassing stories. Yuchan complains that he waved his hand a lot earlier, and it hurts, while the protagonist says there were many. Ariam says Kangin was talking on equal terms with the great Yuchan, and Unseo was speaking.
Song Hwan suggests he might start acting, but Ariam looks at him shamefully.
Minji runs towards the protagonist, calling for the snack uncle. The protagonist questions how she was, and the girl says she was no longer bored.
Mi Young approaches, saying they reserved good seats for Mr. Nakhangin, and Ariam is surprised by them.
The protagonist says he already has a ticket, and Tae Ho Di tells them to leave it empty because he is.
Song Hwan says he could learn to cook and have another job too and be the next celebrity. Inside the packed cinema, they gather. Tae Min says it would be nice if Mr. Kangin had joined the acknowledgements, and Kong denies it because he didn't want his face to be famous since he. The director says this film would have only one premiere, and if it weren't for Kangin, they would have. Then thanks him and notes that the film was starting. Kong lifts his head and begins to focus.
All his friends watch excitedly. Outside, the staff notice a lot of noise coming from the cinema room, including applause, and the cinema stage lights turn on to indicate the film is over. Jian says that if it weren't for their help, they would have done just an ordinary job, but the audience comments that the film passed in an instant and was incredible, and now the stage interview with the.
Jian thanks everyone for coming and watching.
The scenes where there was a collapse in the studio were real scenes, and if they find out, some members will say.
But he assures that they didn't do it intentionally and simply used the footage with.
But it was clear that no one got hurt, and if there were any casualties, they would never have used it.
Kang thinks that public opinion might get worse, and it's something the public relations team will handle later.
A reporter introduces himself as Kim, and says he has a question for Unha, and wants. Because in the film, she seems shocked, however, the girl says she was completely healthy and was rescued safely. He questions about Yuchan, and he responds that he probably wouldn't be in this world if he got hurt.
His food truck uncle did it.
Since he has a body like his, he asked him to stay there since he worked hard, and Kong thinks for him not to look. As he was a civilian, he should omit this from the article. In communities all over the internet, people comment that this was the best film they had seen. 2 days later, Ariam says that her film had been a success. Kang questions why she was calling it that, and the girl says that he was like family too. The protagonist says that he made a film, and that was enough, while Ariam complains that she would like to see a celebrity again. He complains that he was busy with other things, and she questions what he was doing as the boss at the internet cafe. The protagonist responds that it was a special mission for the Union of the Earth. Ariam stares at him, and says that he was definitely crazy. Elsewhere, Tieho laughs with happiness, saying that they managed to do it, and the director says, but there was no way his film could be bad for the audience, and he was confident it. Tieho says that at this point, it won't take long, and Taemin will be a viral director of 10 million. The performance on the first day was so bad that he almost cried, where theaters were empty. Taemin says that for the next film, he was considering a full-scale action, and Taemin says that he was an expert in romance. But the director mentions the name of Nakangan, because if they have him, they can skip the script work. Tieho calls for the director, asking if he wants to sign the film with them, because they will pay generously, and the president questions if he had spoken with Mr. Nakangan, and Taemin says he will try now. Kang receives a call on his cell phone, thinking it was an unknown number, and hangs up. On a radio show, the host says they were bringing 2 special guests from the film Sunny Day. They welcome Kim Yoo-chan and Chernun-ha, asking how they feel about Sunny Day having become incredibly popular recently, and the young. The radio host says that the building collapsed, and Doon-ha confirms, but she was not in danger. That host says it seems serious and questions where Yoo-chan was at that time. He says he was thrown away before the accident, and it wasn't in the film because he was thrown in a strange way. The radio host responds that the stuntman was incredible and calculated. Yoo-chan says he even jumped into a car and stopped with a metal plate. That woman on the radio says to wait a second because she saw the film, and there was no such scene. Both are astonished to hear about this. Anha thinks her colleague was saying unnecessary things, and says he was not only a good stuntman, but a. The woman reads the chat from her live where someone comments that the car stopping clip was real. Both think they are in trouble, and the chat complains about this being reality. In his office, Tieho gets irritated upon hearing about this, shouting that Yoo-chan was an idiot. The leader of the teacher on marketing team complains about the actor, and the president says they need a. That leader comments that he revealed earlier than the scheduled 20 days. Tieho questions if there's another way, and the leader says they must change the timing, and if they miss the timing. The president sighs a little and moves his cell phone, then puts it to his ear while listening to it ring. Khan answers, and he thinks it might be luck, and Tieho responds that he was a hero, but it was the company that would handle. They will make people see this video as something impressive and not serious. Instead of blaming Ninji, they will focus on how cool he is. The protagonist tells him to go ahead and just not mention his name in the credits, or any type of interview. After a short break, they return with part 2 and after the music. Yoo-chan complains about the team leader, and apologizes to him several times. If there's something he can do, he should just say it, because he will give anything, and the leader tells him to reveal everything. They plan to reveal this in 20 days, but now they have to do it now, and the CEO had agreed to do it. Wonha warns that they were starting, and Yoo-chan says yes, and they won't mention Kong. The radio host returns with the program and says the comments were exploding. Yoo-chan says he will talk about what happened since he didn't have the chance to explain earlier. A real event had occurred on the first day they started recording in the studio, and some kidnappers tried. Wonha is surprised, thinking they decided to drop the bomb at this moment. Yoo-chan explains that the food truck guy managed to capture the kidnappers, and everyone watched the video. People on the internet comment that he wasn't human, and had the skills of a special agent. Upon analysis, a man notes that he was faster than the Olympic record. On another site, they analyze that he might be the best baseball player in history. Jin mentions that the agent's information was spreading on the internet, and Kong says his name and face weren't revealed, so it was fine. Questioning if he could go to the Olympics,
but the system says he can't pass A. Baseball was facing the same issues, and the protagonist tells him to give up because he won't do it. Jian changes the subject, and says they should move to a more stable and better place. He could rest the combat mode more efficiently, and Kong asks if they can manage with their funds. The artificial intelligence says the payment for the recent movie had already been deposited into the account. 5 million won were deposited, and Kong questions if that was all. Aram says she will share something and, from the moment she saw the video, she knew it was Kangen. She has a good eye for people, and Song Hwan says he didn't know there was another skilled person. The girl questions if he had seen another person like Appa Kangen. Song Hwan confirms because the person he met was incredibly skilled too. In his room, Kong complains that his ears were burning. She asks if this was the place where not Kangen works, and Song Hwan confirms but notices who she was. Then he asks if it could be, and Wonsa calls her friend. Asking what brings her there and mentioning she was super busy recently. While Wonha says she came to talk to Kangen and heard the food is good, the girl says he was in his room now, because she questions if he doesn't have a face, and Wonsa says she doesn't know, but he eats and it might be a bit inappropriate for a man and a woman to live under the same roof, and Wonha says. They start to argue because Kong isn't that type of person and wouldn't do anything to her. Kong gets up upon hearing someone open his room door. The girl calls for her appa, and the protagonist questions why she was coming to him. She says she came to apologize for what Yikan said on the radio. Kangen says it wasn't her who spoke, and she mentioned she appeared on the same show, and that guy really. He was being punished by Min Young at that moment with some tough times. Kong asks if she came all this way just to say that. She says she also heard the internet cafe is famous for its food and came to try it. The protagonist says they weren't serving food today because he has a place to go, and Wonha asks where he's going. He says he needs a place to stay, and as she can see, this was an ideal. Wonha questions why someone like him was living there, and the protagonist says he has his reasons. The girl imagines the protagonist, thinking he was a type of man with his stories. She says she would go with him, and it would be good to have someone to help him choose, and Kong responds that he can go alone. Both decide to go together and enter a house. The girl is amazed, and the protagonist says it has a refrigerator, an older conditioner, and she asks if he isn't paid enough to live in a small apartment, and Kong confirms. Wonha says she doesn't understand why someone like him stays in an internet cafe, but now she doesn't. She questions how much he got and offers to help find the best place with the money he received, and Kong says. The girl is completely taken aback upon the account balance. The person on the other side answers and says it was Shin Unha. Minyan questions what happened and shouldn't say that she was asking to forgive Kim Yuchan now. The girl says no and will leave that decision to the sunbathe. It seemed that Mr. Not Kong and only received 5 million for his appearance fee. Min Yun says it seems there are more people to deal with, and Unha says Kong and didn't say. She says he saved the movie and more importantly was her daughter's savior and will check with Taehu while Unha thanks her. She says that until they respond, they will check out better places in the city. Lee Taehu calls the protagonist, saying he was looking into it, and he only received 5 million for the director's son was very busy with the film's release, so the payment department just processed it as usual, and that's so he calculated as the official stunt coordinator, and now he would transfer the total of one. The girl comments that the previous deposit was very little, and the protagonist says she knows a lot of things. Unha says she is the kind of woman who helps those around her, and the protagonist says it seemed good. Yun says she will ensure a clear line of sight of potential enemies, and if they install curtains, they can. Unha questions what he will do with the remaining 5 million, and Sheehan thinks they need secure mobility. He decides he will buy a vehicle, and the girl says she knows a good place, but with 50 million, he should get. The protagonist turns to Unha, wanting to know why she keeps trying to help him,
and if she happened. The girl blushes and asks why he was asking about that, and Kong says he was curious since she keeps trying to help him. Eun-ha says she was an actress, and just happened to have her schedule free and appeared there confidentially. She would have helped the same way because they are friends, and Kong says then it was a no, but his ears were turning red, and Eun-ha is shocked to hear about it. She says she won't help him if she hears something like that, and Sheehan thinks it was. The girl recounts that on that day, if she had been hurt by the iron, she would have been injured or worse, but he saved her. She wouldn't be alive if it weren't for that accident, and to be honest, she thinks it. The girl really thought it was like that, but when she was alone at home, she started to realize things. Upon entering her dark house, her heart raced as she remembered the moment. Since that day, a house without light leaves her completely anxious, and the incident keeps appearing in her dreams. She thought it could be safer, and would be alright if it were him, but she notices the protagonist wasn't listening. In a crowded dealership in the city of Seoul, Eun-ha questions if he really plans to buy that with his. He had good used tones in the cars there, but she wants to know why that old wreck, and Kong says it was rude. The seller says she was right and brought it there to sell, but no one wants to buy it even. Eun-ha says there are tons of better and prettier cars, and they should look, but the protagonist asks to look under the hood. The protagonist starts analyzing everything there, asking if he could fix a car like that, and Jean confirms because he has. The protagonist says this model was 80 years older than him, and the AI tells him, once he fixes the electrical and fuel systems, everything will work correctly. Kong says he liked it, and Eun-ha says he could get a better car, and she would even lend him some money. The seller asks if he really wants to sell it, and the engine was terrible and won't take responsibility. They decide to make a deal, and Eun-ha is completely shocked. In a public men's restroom, the protagonist asks Jean if it wouldn't be better to fix the car in the new. The artificial intelligence says this might raise suspicions with the neighbors, and Kong says it was a great place. He had already marked a good location to use as a base, and recently had closed deals. He had gathered necessary information while accompanying him, and the protagonist asks if he noticed while they were. Jean says they should just take the parts they need and repair there, in a place further away from Seoul. Eun-ha asks where this place was, because he was bringing a broken guy to this random place, and the protagonist says not to. The girl complains, asking if he signed up for a horror movie without telling and brought her there. That door opens, and they come face to face with a strange place. She questions what this is and if he was planning to fix the car there, and Kong agrees. Eun-ha asks if he knows how to fix the car and if he needs a mechanic's license, but Jean analyzes. The protagonist responds that NeoTube teaches everything, and Eun-ha questions if he was joking, but what if it She wants to know what place this is, and Kong says it was a metal shop, and the place was closed because Kong opens the car hood, putting a red glove on his hand. The girl is surprised to see this. The protagonist asks why she wasn't leaving and if she plans to follow him for an entire day. She questions who was following whom, as he was the one who brought her there. Kong is confused, and she says this was infuriating. The girl decides she will leave, and he shouldn't stop her, as even if he gets bored, it wasn't a problem. She responds that she will just call her manager, but the signal there didn't work since they were deep in the mountains. She questions if she was trapped there, and Kong says that at night, ghosts also come there. The girl trembles with fear. Kong says that honestly, he planned this for a long time, questioning why she thinks he brought her to that place. The girl trembles with fear, saying there's no way, then asks him not to do this because she's not ready, and Kong tells her. She warns that he will show how to fix it, and first must remove in the indicated order. Eun-ha complains that he was just annoying while doing it himself, and Kong says her reaction was funny. The girl questions why he doesn't write the order where he will disconnect it, because there was a scene in a movie where someone She says the protagonist has an incredible memory, and says it was his memory, while Kong. Eun-ha also comments that his hands move precisely and quickly as if he were a machine. Kong finishes, and the protagonist tells his test doll to get in the driver's seat, and she says there was no way, and that was He tells her to relax because he had fixed it perfectly after calculating everything, and Eun-ha But while driving, she notices it was simple, and there was no engine noise. He wasn't just good at cooking and martial arts, but his car repair skills were incredible too, and Wonha questions why rent this place for a year since he fixed the car quickly. If the apartment in Seoul they went to earlier was his living base, this place would be his production base, and he plans to make the mission equipment. The protagonist responds that she doesn't need to know. She questions where they were going, and Kong says he would drop her home. Wonha says that in that case, she has a favor to ask. Wanting to know how he installed the smart system to control from his phone, and if he can put it in her house. The girl explains that they live very far away, and the protagonist responds to call others. She apologizes because she was scared. Lately, she keeps dreaming about the scenario collapsing and hasn't been able to sleep. Jin thinks it was a common symptom among soldiers in war zones, and they dreamed about their entire. He says that rescuing civilians was a basic mission of the army on Earth, so he will help the girl in any way. He enters Wonha's house and helps her, informing her that everything was ready and she should turn off the lights to test. Everything goes dark, and the girl starts fiddling with her phone, with everything working shortly after, and she thanks him for it, and the protagonist tells her not to mention it, because he was going to leave, and she, wanting to know if her friend was hungry, because she was going to cook a delicious meal for him, and would. Honestly, she went to the internet cafe because she wanted to taste his food, but since she owed him. There is a restaurant she knows, and it was good, and the chef was Gutchit. Jin says that understanding the local culture made integration easier, and high-end restaurants were beyond his budget. The protagonist says that the artificial intelligence just wanted to eat, leaving Wonha puzzled. He responds that he hopes it will be better than his food and loves it too. The two go to a completely luxurious building. Wonha says this place is a bit famous, and wants to know if he heard about it, but the protagonist denies it. She says it wasn't easy to get a reservation, and not just anyone went there, saying she was Jiananya, the beautiful, famous, and perfect actress, but the protagonist just sighs. She says she filmed many movies with the chef and got his number to make a room for two. Kong questions who she was planning to take there when she made the reservation. The girl remembers the previous night, and says it wasn't something important, but anyway, they should enter their room for the meal. In a place called Café de Yumhan, the two sit in the chair. Kong comments about thinking it was a restaurant, but it was. The protagonist thinks about the date. That fact where his identity exists in the government's database makes him wonder if he had a life like everyone else there. The girl says they should ask for a place by the window. The girl answers the phone, saying she will confirm the dinner on her reservation tonight, but she is Wonha says someone more important than her came, and her reservation was withdrawn, but they cancelled it. The protagonist suggests they go eat gukbap or something like that, but she says there was no way, because he should stay. People in the restaurant noticed that it was Shernun Ha. The protagonist asks how the coffee there was, and Ji Yen says it was good. On the first floor of the restaurant, there was a certain tension. The security guard wonders what the noise was, but notices some men and wonders who these guys were. One of them runs towards the security guard, striking his stomach with an E. The security guard falls to the ground, and the thief says their target was Penelope on the 7th floor. On the 7th floor, Wonha asks how the chef could do this because he said there was a table yesterday. The chef apologizes and says a crucial reservation came suddenly, and the girl questions how important the guest could be. Okushio says she was the last to make the reservation, and had no choice because honestly, Wonha says she had said before and came all this way, and Kushio apologizes and thought his staff had. If she comes again tomorrow, he promises to treat her properly, and the girl is hesitant. In another corner of the restaurant, someone is talking on the phone. Taeho says that his brother insisted on coming there and barely managed to book the last night, but now the young man questions if he will eat alone, and his wife was busy with her scheme. Taeho's son apologizes anyway and says they will talk later. The president says that eating alone is not his style and notices Wonha talking to Kyushio. He approaches, and he questions that she was alone, and Wonha denies it because she came with Kanjen, but their reservation the president. Taeho says that 3 are better than 2, and the girl gets angry. She questions if everything was okay, and Kyushio says yes because it was the same as hers before everything. Kang drinks the coffee, saying it was totally amazing. Maybe he can chemically analyze how to make a different coffee, and his tongue wasn't that sensitive. The protagonist looks at Wonha's messages on his phone. In questions if the agent really prefers beef soup over gourmet food and was just being polite. Kanjen says he must be an insect, and this assistant was really annoying today, but he wants. Gin says that an anomaly had been detected. Besides, the first floor's construction had its shutter closed. Analyzing the noise of the current state of the fire shutter, besides the entrance being completely closed. Reconstructing and interpreting the 4 distinct voices. People wonder why the shutter closed and didn't hear any siren. The protagonist decides he will go down and check, but the system detects an armed person. Some people were walking behind the internet cafe. He asks about the armament, and Gin says there were sounds of guns reloading, and he should retreat because they were approaching in 10 seconds. The protagonist says there's only one exit and wants to know where he should go, and Gin tells him to break the cafe. Kang questions if he is being told to jump to his painless fate, and the robot reminds him that he is on. The bandits kick open the door. People wonder what that was because they were shooting the gun. Anyone who screams will be shot immediately, and they must shut up and move to the hallway. Taeho wonders what is happening and if this is a planned event. Judging by Chief Kichio's face, nothing was planned. Thinking this is real and creating a look of fear on his face. Wonha asks what she could do, and the president tells her to stay calm and do. Everyone moves quietly forward. The girl says that Kangin was on the 2nd floor right now, and that's right, and if you call him, he will. But a bandit points a gun at her, asking if she doesn't understand the situation because phones. Wanting to know if she wants to report this, but the girl denies it, pretending she doesn't know the police number. The bandit orders them to go to the corner of the wall, and the pair moves quickly. Onha says that Kang and Appa will come since he is strong. Taeho says that no matter how strong he is, everyone is equal before a gun, but they must get out of. Kang continues staring at the 2nd floor window, wondering about breaking it. Then repeats to himself that rescuing civilians is a fundamental mission of the Earth Alliance. Therefore, retreating is not an option. The bandits open the cafe door. They point their guns and tell them not to move and to keep their hands up. The civilians are completely confused upon seeing this. Wondering if it could be an internet livestream because it seemed like someone was confessing today. The bandits get irritated upon hearing this noise. Then they shoot at a cafe window. People think it was a real gun, and he repeats to put their hands up if they don't want to lose their life. Kang whispers to Jian to confirm the enemy's equipment. It was a 9mm semi-automatic gun equipped with a high-performance suppressor. His ammunition was silenced, and the weapon itself had a sound reduction module. And Kang says that with this advanced equipment, there were no thieves. Jian says that currently, the agent had no equipment. And due to the disparity, he should escape. Kang says that Unha wasn't coming down from the 7th floor, and he assumes they. Unha calls for Kang and Appa. Wondering if he wasn't going to come and what would happen now. Taeho notices that the bandits were with a woman. Unha wonders who she was and if she was a minister from abroad or something like that. And Taeho says she was Scarlett Kelly, a CEO and head of Omega Tech. The actor says it was a company with shares in Apple and Google, but he denies it, thinking that Omega Tech develops military equipment. Her father, Lee Youngmin, was the CEO of Iron Qigong, which built. But when her brother found out Kelly was there, he requested the reservation. Her company was well known in the film and performance industry, so he knew the chief Gikiol. But now her brother wasn't here, and he was captured. And Manhwa says that if this woman is the target, it must be a dispute between weapon manufacturers. The bandit orders the two to be quiet because if they make another sound, he will take their lives. Pointing the gun again at Scarlett, and ordering her to say the access code if she wants to live. No matter how much she loved money, it meant nothing if she lost her life. Because whatever amount he has, she will pay double, and no one has been hurt yet. The bandit laughs hysterically, saying he refuses. Scarlett also refuses because even if they make her suffer, she won't give the access code. The bandit twists her arm, saying he will see if it's true calmly, shooting in the middle of the civilians. He says there are many of them, and he will take all their lives. Scarlett becomes apprehensive when she hears this. Jen says she detected two unusual instances coming from a floor above, and it was similar to they. At least 3 floors higher than that. Kong thinks that if the enemy fired twice, the first shot seemed to be a warning and questions about the second. The protagonist whispers that breaking glass seemed more dramatic and was perfect for intimidation. A child suddenly screams in fear. The bandit tells them to shut up and asks if the mother can make him quiet. She tries to calm her son, telling Jian not to cry, and she screams for her mother. The bandit continues calling them bastards. Then points the gun, saying he told them to shut up and will take the life of every noise they make, with Jian. The protagonist appears behind him and says the police are there. Kong takes a deep breath and moves his hand from side to side, apologizing because he didn't want to get so much. He says that children cry when they are scared, and shooting someone for crying wasn't. The bandit tells him to shut up, and the subordinates inform their leader about this guy. He asks if the protagonist thought he wouldn't shoot just because he was facing the glass. At this point, they won't even miss the shot, telling him to go to hell while pulling the trigger, but with another blow aimed at the assassin's arm, Kong moves, hitting his arm and twisting it. The bandit groans in pain as his bone had been shattered. His weapon flies far away. The boss orders them to get that bastard, and Kong dodges from side to side. Jian says the glass panels were protective with bulletproof capacity and can't be penetrated with those bullets. The protagonist jumps once more onto the table, defending himself with it while the bandits. The table is suddenly thrown against them. Kong runs amidst the assassins, moving and managing to strike the blow on their heads. Everyone stands still, and the boss groans a little on the ground. The protagonist notices this, but something hits him suddenly. Jian says he was showing the bullet's trajectory, and he must dodge. People are astonished, and the shot grazes the protagonist's arm. That boss wonders how a person can dodge every bullet. The protagonist lands a kick on the villain's head, driving him into the ground. People comment that the man won and thank him for saving them. Jian warns that there were children approaching the agent. The boy asks if he is a superhero and defeated everyone at once. The artificial intelligence says the witness had a lot of blood, which wasn't good for. The protagonist notices the underwear he was wearing. Then he moves it with all his strength, leaving the children confused. But the guy places the underwear on the bandit's face, and the kids question what the. Kong says they don't need to worry, and his arm wasn't hurt, so they shouldn't be concerned.
There were 3 semi-automatic weapons with 3.
Jian says he finally got the weapons and must disarm them all. And the protagonist wonders if he can do that with so many people watching. With this level of control, other groups might be waiting outside, and escaping could be dangerous, and the AI agrees as it. Civilians, unlike the agent, have a high chance of perishing, and Com comments that Manhwa was probably on the 7th. If they don't move quietly, people might be in danger, and he is somewhat wise. The protagonist looks at the masked men, removing the masks from their faces. Jian says they look like outsiders, and all 3 have the same ethnicity. They were outsiders who spoke their language fluently, and these guys were probably planning to get something and run. Jian says their firepower is insufficient, and should arm the civilians, and it was better not to fight.
Kong responds that it wasn't 2082 anymore, and the AI asks to quickly see their cooperation.
The protagonist questions if anyone has experienced shooting guns and needs 2 volunteers. About 4 people agree to this. Com questions each one's role, and they say they were military.
Both have children, and terrorists might plant spies among civilians but won't bring children.
Com warns he will check another area, and they should guard the cafe, so both agree. The protagonist says they shouldn't give the weapons to anyone and not let anyone except the police, as there might be snipers outside. Kong takes a radio from the man with the rabbit mask. Jian says he wasn't military, and had signs of short-range modification, so a voice calls the man. Kong questions if the AI remembers the rabbit mask's voice, and it begins to modify the agent's voice. The protagonist says he disciplined those who didn't follow orders. People are astonished by this, and the person on the radio asks if he was acting recklessly again. Kong says they need to show these guys that they aren't just 3 people, and will go up for a moment. He stands up and asks if a woman has a compact mirror, and she does. The protagonist thanks her with a wide smile, making all the girls blush. Kong goes up the stairs, commenting that they disabled the elevators. However, Jian says there was movement coming from the 1st floor.
Abandon questions how he managed to handle the civilians he brought, and Jian activates Com.
That thief says the people are amateurs, and will go up first to check. Kong reflects that there were people in the cafe, and were probably talking, but these guys don't know if they're. This means they haven't been colleagues for long, and someone gathered them for an operation, and if someone important enough. The boss was probably on the 7th floor in the restaurant, and Jian warns there will be contact with the enemy. Kong goes up the stairs and looks at the bandit who was climbing, striking his face easily, and leaving him knocked. Kong places a mirror by the side of the door, noticing a guard was walking while. If your hypothesis is correct, there was more than one person on the 1st floor, and it was a security guard.
Kong easily strikes him in the face to knock him out.
He groans as he falls to the ground, and Jian questions why he assumed they were enemies. The protagonist explains that they were using a modified radio just like the guys on the 1st floor. Jian comments that if he had missed a punch, his opponent would have died, and he just adjusted the angle. The AI starts to lecture, and the protagonist tells it to stop there. Kong throws the security guard next to the other tied-up thugs. People wonder if he managed to take down 2 more, and the protagonist responds that it was nothing. He was a guard of this building, but it seemed they attacked him and he passed out, so they'll let him wake up. The military wonders if there was someone on the 1st floor and rushed to get out of there, but it doesn't work. Kong says they use firearms and must have planted mines at the restaurant entrance. Moreover, he tried to press the button in the security room, but there's no response, and they must. That's how the person was leading control above the stairs, and he will handle it step by. Kong goes up the stairs again, and Jian warns that there were no sounds of people coming from the 3rd floor. All rooms besides the office seemed locked. There was no sound of breathing coming from the 4th floor either. There was a faint spark coming from above at the open door, and the protagonist should check. He opens it suddenly, and Jian says he found the control room. There were sparks from each generator's hard drive, completely destroyed with the computers broken as well. They made it impossible to recover footage, phone, or internet lines, blocking. Kong says the first floor was the lobby, and the second is the cafe, and the armed forces were. She is a supporting actress, and the AI knew that, with the evening of that place. A man in a camouflage hood sits while drinking a bit. He looks to the side and notices the police car, wondering why they were there since communication was completely cut off. Then he warns that they got visitors and should patrol a car. There were 2 officers inside, and on the 7th floor, they receive the message. The radio on the 2nd floor catches the protagonist's attention, questioning if someone in the Kong whispers, thanking for the information because he will alter his voice to match his, responding that it was the 2nd. The thug stays silent for a few seconds and calls for the 1st floor. Kong notices it was a different radio, and heard his voice earlier, responding that he was aware the police. The thug tells him to say the doors were locked because of the security system, and the protagonist responds incorrectly. Now about the access code, they will continue, and Scarlet questions who he was. The thug responds that if it were easy to say, he wouldn't be wearing a mask. Everyone who saw his face lost their lives and questions if she wants to see, but her life had value, and if she wants to. Scarlet looks to the side, seeing her secretary Jessica being tied up. The redhead bites her lip and says the password was Prometheus, Ouroboros, and Pandora. Those were the 3 steps for the access code, and now that she spoke, they should let her go, and the thug says his men outside weren't for decoration, and if the access code is false, her ordering to check the password of Prometheus, Ouroboros, and Pandora. Scarlet tries to reverse her mistake, saying it was a lie. Access is denied, and the thug pulls the trigger, hitting the secretary's head and leaving Scarlet with her face stained with blood. Her secretary was lying on the ground, and the woman calls her name in fear, screaming with her Outside, the police officer questions if it wasn't a prank, and they were sure of it. Someone from the cafe had apparently made a call, and it had been something massive there, but the police officers. A set of signs indicated that the building was being occupied by terrorists. They should call the police, please. The officer decides they would go back. He wonders who the hell would play such a prank because he was very sleepy. His colleague looks to the side a bit apprehensive, but decides to leave as well. The hooded man outside wonders if they just left, and it was a relief. They were idiots, and he informs that the police on the 1st floor have withdrawn, with the criminal telling him to He comments that she seemed very downcast, showing that it was just wine that he will give one more chance, and this time it would be real. Wonha comments that she thought it was real, and Teju says they threw the wine, but the woman seemed to faint. He releases Scarlet's face while the woman looks down apprehensively. The police car is still there, and the assistant asks why they were leaving since That officer responds that this was the exact reason why they were leaving, and it wasn't something the 2 could handle. Questioning who knows how many were inside that building. If they act without thinking, things will escalate faster, and that was the reason why he just left. To call for reinforcements elsewhere, moments later, an entire team analyzes that they have a list of people. It would be a problem if there were any celebrities, and the man says they have Scarlet Kelly from Omega Tech. One of the agents is surprised, asking if it was the actress. With the president of Teju also being there, it seemed it was really Shernunha, and that was insane. Wanting to know if they all went to eat something made by Gichio, if a celebrity is taken hostage or loses their life. Once they arrive, they will cross the street and check the situation from the terrace. Being there, a police officer informs the captain that they covered all the windows on the 7th floor, and a type of inside the car, a subordinate questions what should be done, and the captain says the command will, ordering them to grab their weapons and secure the perimeter without letting anyone escape from there. A criminal informs his boss that there were His boss complains, ordering to proceed with planning, and it was the first time they had. Then he points the gun at Tiaho, ordering him to come along. The president questions why suddenly, but the criminal warns that he will go down and deliver the message. Tiaho says it was a mistake, and she is not his girlfriend, but the criminal thinks. Manhwa wonders what the hell was happening and trembles with fear, asking for the protagonist to come to save her. On another floor, the protagonist counts the bulletproof vests, and Gian says it was the fifth detection. Kong says that above the fifth floor, they had planted bombs, and if it weren't for him, he would have lost his leg now. But coming from the floor above, a criminal orders him to do as instructed, because if he says something unnecessary, the criminal orders him to go there, and say exactly what they tell him, and that everything was fine. Gian detects the voice as that of President Lee Tiaho. The criminals warn that there is a trap planted on the stairs, and Tiaho should lead the way. That president descends with fear and completely apprehensive at every step he took, saying he really managed to do it, and the man goes to the door, surprised afterward. One of the criminals wonders what that was and if it was a young lady, because someone came out from the lower. The girl questions what was happening because she was in the office, but when she woke up, everything was off, and she watched. Lee Tiaho thinks it was definitely no Kanjin, but with a woman's voice. Moreover, her expressions and gestures were completely different from what he imagined. The criminal orders to look at the path the team will send, and escaping was impossible, especially being a woman. They will just knock out and go to the next floor. Kong moves at an incredible speed and swings his leg towards the bandit's face, landing a kick that sends him flying. That bullet hits the bulletproof vest of his ally, and the bandits wonder what the hell this guy was. Kong takes the bandit hostage and points his new weapon, shooting at the arms and legs of the bandits. Then he moves once more and jumps to shoot, hitting non-vital points but making it impossible for them to move. Kong steps on their faces shortly after. The protagonist raises his face, and someone asks if Manhwa could be his girlfriend instead of Kong. Those bandits groan in pain on the ground. Kong questions about the others, but Gian says they were the only ones, and the short-range combat support was over. Lee Tiaho says that Mr. Kanjin was really incredible, and the protagonist notices that the boss came from the 7th floor, wanting to know. After everything is told, he says the plan was changed because of the police, and they tried to. A radio from the 7th floor warns that Jackal was trying to communicate. He heard screams on the floor below, so he must report the situation, while Tiaho thinks they. The protagonist perfectly mimics the voice, saying that 2 guys on the 5th floor were subdued and there were no. Jackal questions if he searched properly, and Kong says there was a hidden passage. With no time to proceed, he hangs up, and Tiaho questions how his voice was exactly like the guy. Kong says mimicry was his personality, and tells him to wear the bulletproof vest, wanting to know if Manhwa was okay. Jian assumes that celebrities have high values as hostages. Then she warns she will go ahead, while Tiaho says he has a gun too, so he will fight by her side. Kong questions his position, and the president is a little hesitant, saying he was in the promotional unit of the defense. Besides keeping an eye on the guys who were unconscious, and Tiaho questions what if. The protagonist tells him to shoot them in the head because it will take them down easily, but the man. On the upper floor, Jackal orders to give the code quickly. Scarlet responds that even if they take her life, she would never tell, making the man. He points the gun, saying she should just lose her life until some subordinates are thrown back. The men turn around, and Scarlet is astonished by the protagonist punching and sending 2 men flying. People wonder what this is and if it was the police. Others continue shooting at him while they walk. But the protagonist dodges all the shots with his perfect acrobatics, then uses his strength to propel. Advancing with his hands ready to neutralize the weapons, the protagonist grabs the arm of one of the bandits. Kong draws his weapon while talking to Jian, pointing at the bandits while the civilians on the 7th floor. The system warns that Manhwa had disappeared, then questions where the others were, and a civilian says the masked Kong tells everyone to go down the stairs because on the 5th floor they will find President Lee Tae-ho, so they should. In another room, the bandits say that Guy didn't seem like a cop, and he responds that his goal was to escape with the target. As she talks so loudly it drove him crazy, and Anha screams for Kong and to save her. The bandit says if the police blackmail them, they should just throw her, and she is perfect to be thrown. Anha tells those bastards to stop speaking in their beastly language, suddenly knocks Kong and enters the room, breaking the. He walks calmly towards the bandits, 2 of them run towards him, calling him a bastard. But Jian anticipates the trajectory of the knives and marks for the protagonist to dodge. Kong advances with his eyes shining, jumping while using the wall for momentum. Then he shoots at the backs of the bandits. The one holding Anha in his arms says he was a stupid fool and tries to shoot upwards, but Kong performs other acrobatics to dodge. Telling Anha to duck while he points the gun, the woman obeys his commands, and Kong lands 3. He falls backward, leaving the crime scene calmer, with only a wound on his shoulder that makes the bandit. Jackal orders the bastard to stop, and Scarlet asks to be freed. Blood flies around the room, and Anha screams in panic. The woman's arm is damaged, and Jackal points the gun at her head, warning that she was the next target, and if he doesn't, Kong throws his pistol to the other side of the room without hesitation. Scarlet is astonished to see this and stares at the protagonist, breathing heavily. The armed forces begin to enter the location. Everyone was apprehensive, but they decide not to shoot the people coming out as they seem to be civilians. The women recount that the terrorists with guns entered the cafe and tried to shoot. Everyone thought they would lose their lives, but someone even more terrifying than them had appeared on the scene. He dodged the bullets in the blink of an eye and took everyone down. Everyone must have lost their lives. The captain says he was talking about a ghost or a ninja who dodged all the bullets and took down the terrorists. Wanting to know what kind of nonsense this was, while his subordinate says everyone must be having hallucinations. Maybe they were hallucinogenic weapons, so we must ensure his team wears gas masks. Inside the building, Anha asks if her APA is insane for throwing the gun, but the protagonist. Jackal questions how he got there and received a report about no problems on the lower floors. Kong drops all the radios that were under his shirt, imitating the subordinate's voice while saying it was. Because it was he who made all the voices. And Jackal gets irritated upon understanding the same information he repeated, but curses the situation. Kong grabs a kitchen knife that was on the table, advancing while dodging the shots at unimaginable speed and throws it. Scarlet falls into Anha's arms. Kong tells them to use him as a shield and leave calmly, because he will end this. Wanting to know where he came from and what his codename was. The protagonist lowers his head, saying he will say it only once and must listen with full attention. Then advances, landing a punch on his opponent's stomach repeatedly. Then strikes his chin, knocking out some teeth, landing a kick to the head and others to the stomach. Thus, Jackal is thrown far and collides with the piano. Jackal wonders what that meant. Jian reminds the protagonist that the hostage has a wound on her arm and needs first aid. Ji Cheol enters the room suddenly, asking if Scarlet was okay. And Anha asks if he was watching from a safe distance. But the protagonist opens the first aid kit and starts selecting the equipment. And Jian says the wound wasn't deep and it seemed the bullet only grazed her. And it wasn't life-threatening. Scarlet thanks to Special Agent for saving her life. Because they were in all this trouble because of her. And Scarlet says her grandmother is Korean. Anha says she speaks Korean clearly but was using English. And she explains he was probably a US agent to protect her. The Special Forces agents climbed the stairs quickly and cautiously.
ordering to stay alert because you never know what might happen. Tae-ho notices that people were climbing.
Then he says it was the police. The president cries with happiness because they were there. But the agents order him to drop the weapons immediately, saying he seriously thought he would lose his life waiting for them. After a few minutes, they confirmed the identity of President Lee Tae-ho, questioning if it was he who took them down. But the president denies it since the person came and hit everyone with ease. The guards quickly duck when they notice there are landmine bombs in the corner of the room. Lee Tae-ho picks it up with his hand, asking if it was that. The agents tell this idiot to close that bomb before it explodes. The bald man welcomes them to his restaurant upstairs. Those agents wonder if it was a flash grenade but soon identify Chief Kyuchul. He tells them not to worry because everyone was safe there. There was only one injured person, but she received first aid and was fine now. And Unha says they were all unconscious, each of those who were inside the building. The agents are apprehensive seeing this, wondering why they came all this way. Outside, the police deduced that the terrorists were disguised among the civilians and must check each person. Then they thanked Mr. Khan because they avoided a disaster. They also quickly identified the leader and hand some coffee to the protagonist. An international criminal involved in terrorism, thefts, and kidnapping. He was on Interpol's radar and wonders how he could defeat this guy with a single blow. Khan says they seemed like mercenaries. Jackal had only 3 real subordinates. In this case, someone lured the American woman into the building. And it was one of his employees who recommended the place. And Khan looks out the window thoughtfully. And it was admirable. But it wasn't something they could easily do. Moreover, he noticed that none of them had their lives threatened by the wounds. Asking how he acquired such skills. And Ji-in says the officer doubts the protagonist's identity. There was a list of excuses for the infiltration and operation manual. Khan says that about 2 years ago, he left the army. Then he trained in the mountains during that time, staying under the waterfall for 7 days. He traveled in the Taebaek Mountains for training. The protagonist created his own martial art that incorporates weapons and practiced with water pistols. The martial art is called the gun fist style. Practicing with water weapons works well. And this could be the power of talent. In an emergency room of a Korean hospital, the doctors are impressed to see Scarlet. Because of that scar, the pattern and shape was something he remembered. Then he questions who stitched the wound. The doctor responds that he was curious. But the woman replies she can't say that. Jessica interrupts, saying they were attacked by terrorists and can't release unnecessary. In Chief Lee Young-ho's clinic room, people rush in saying they had good news. That doctor says he found the man who made the scar like a sewing machine. But the doctor responds he didn't know yet. And the style is identical. But they had left after basic treatment. He feels sorry and said they needed to leave urgently. Young-ho responds that it didn't matter who did it. The doctor says the police didn't know either. In the police office, a subordinate hands a paper to Kaeon because the investigation team should have. Even if he doesn't see the contents, only Kyung-kud and the detective complains they. His boss responds it was because he trusted him. Kyung opens the document and is shocked. The boss questions about it because it would be allowed to find out if he knew directly.
Kyung asks if he knows about the movie Sunny Day.
The detective says that the hero involved in the incident was the film's stunt director.
But the real shock is that they know this person. Kyung questions if he remembered the acrobat artist.
The boss says yes. And he captured the killer with a drawing and helped in his performance improvements. Noting that they were the same person and there was no way he could have so many professions and be good at everything. In a government investigation room, people wonder if this makes sense with a boss being the.
To be precise, their investigation is about Jackal and a boss questions how they could ignore.
He saw him carrying someone through a burning building and it seemed like he was good at everything he does. So he assumed he was part of a special forces unit. Checking his classified units, he had received an honorable discharge as A.
He even got a photo of his former commanding officer who confirmed it.
So he was someone who could take down an entire army by himself. Repeating Kyungna in his ridiculous story about training in the mountains eating ginseng, besides having. Then with these bomb defusing skills, he would have learned on YouTube. 2 days later at the internet cafe, Unseo welcomes a new client and says she can't go to that area. Manhwa takes off her glasses for her friend to recognize her. She appears behind the protagonist and he questions why she went there. The girl hands him a bag, asking if he remembers the last time when they couldn't eat. So she brought things to have a meal since he cooks well. Kyung tells her to leave and Manhwa complains, but the protagonist questions why buy ingredients and come there instead of going home.
She should be honest and he will cook.
Manhwa blushes for a few seconds, getting ready each time she thought. Then says she doesn't know and when she's near him, she feels at peace and doesn't have nightmares anymore. Questioning if the protagonist was even listening. Kyung says she picked up some new things and will make a seafood meal. Manhwa thinks she hates him, but at the same time likes him.
After a few minutes, the meal is ready on the kitchen table.
Unseo says it was amazing and the taste seemed incredible and Manhwa is impressed. The blonde puts the food in her mouth, shouting that it was very delicious and Manhwa cries because it was so good.
Kyung thinks they were eating well until someone appears behind them and asks if they can eat that too.
It was Scarlett Kelly with a band on her arm. Manhwa says it was the American woman from last time and Scarlett says she found the. Kyung questions how she got there and the woman says she has some friends in Korea.
She just looked up the name and workplace and Kyung asks for forgiveness.
Jian is sure they also looked into the protagonist's past.
Kyung questions what she wants and Scarlett offers for him to become her bodyguard.
His artificial intelligence warns that becoming a bodyguard will restrict him from other activities. So he sighs, giving relief to the real guards. She questions that she pays with all benefits, but the protagonist says he already has things to do.
Scarlett accepts but says she will just buy some food since she was hungry too. As the day passes at the internet cafe, the American woman says it was incredible.
It was better than anything she tasted even in the best restaurants and Manhwa complains that this food should be hers. Scarlett thanks for the food and says she needs to leave now since she will travel. Handing an Omega Tech card to the protagonist. She says if he doesn't want to be her bodyguard, he could be the part-time boss at her yacht party. Jian says financial problems may arise in the future so it wouldn't hurt to get the number, warning that he will know and Scarlett. Manhwa tells her to remember too because she is part of the team along with him. Being the most beautiful actress of Sunny Day, Scarlett thinks it was a considerable title and says she. Outside she gets into an armored car saying that everything went as expected and Jessica says then it wasn't. Scarlett says she got some new information and her secretary questions if she found the special forces. The American simply responds that he cooks very well, and she was genuinely shocked by this, breaking into a smile. At a Korean airport, Taesung notices someone approaching, saying it should be Miss Scarlet, while the American Taesung introduces himself as the leader of Iron Shigong and heard she had some. It was a relief that things didn't get worse, and Jessica gets annoyed questioning what he was talking about. Her boss just twisted her arm and Taesung says he heard about a terrorist attack. Scarlett says her boss has classified information and must have done some research while the director. Then he corrects his misunderstanding, but it wasn't the case, as his younger brother was also caught. He was guarding the stairs between the 5th and 6th floors. Taesung thinks he was planning to use his connection to talk about business later, but pushing too hard would be bad, so there's a famous TV restaurant chef who knows his brother, and Scarlett seems uninterested. Taesung thinks the atmosphere was cold and says he invested a lot in the movie, questioning if she. Jessica says it's time to fly and feels sorry, but we'll end the small talk here, and Taesung accepts, handing. Scarlett tells Jessica to give her card because she has to work hard now. Taesung responds that it's no problem and will call her later. The next day in another building, the doctors analyze that from the photos. It was clearly done by the same doctor, and everything was identical, including the space. The precision and speed of the sutures left no doubt it was the same person. Young-ho responds that they don't know the doctor's name, and the police refuse to give information. His subordinate responds that they need this doctor to perform Young-ji's surgery, and Young-ho says he will strive every second to find out. At the protagonist's workshop, Woon-ha questions what he was doing, and the protagonist responds that it was a metal cutting machine, and he needs to fix it before repairing any. Woon-ha says that now he even works with metal, while the machine starts to spin. She questions if he was okay, and Calm says he's really good at fixing things like this, telling her to watch because Jian says the equipment was completely broken. Calm complains that she could fix it, and the artificial intelligence says he needs to buy additional materials, and Woon-ha questions what he was whispering, because it wasn't her fault it broke, and Calm says Woon-ha says she understands and has a part like that too, and Calm says they're going out to buy. She questions when he does this, and will just go shopping when he's annoyed. They go to a home goods store, and Woon-ha complains mentally. Calm says it was an equipment store, and Calm responds that it was his store. She suddenly receives a call on her cell phone, she answers, and the person on the other end asks where she is now. Park Woo-seub, her agent, tells her not to drink alcohol and take care of herself because they got an offer. She gets serious for a few seconds, but soon celebrates, saying she will really do it, and Woo-seub. Woon-ha says it's amazing and should sign the contract, but Woo-seub says he doesn't have Kang's number. The commercial needs to add quick movements and wants action choreography done by the director. It would be inspired by the action in his movie and asked to give his number. Woon-ha says he's next to her and will pass the phone, and her agent questions why they were together. The girl complains that there was nothing strange happening, and Kang approaches, wanting to know who it was. Woo-seub says if a scandal breaks out at a critical time, it would be bad, but Kang says they were just. The agent feels relieved to know it was a store and not a meeting, while Kang complains that Woon-ha just followed him there. Woo-seub apologizes for the late introduction but wants to talk to him about a commercial. Kang just accepts things, and Jian calls the agent. They were in the middle of an infiltration mission, and Jian responds that as long as Kang repeats the information to the agent, and Woo-seub tells him not to worry because he will only handle. At the Sia Entertainment, Woon-ha calls for Woo-seub. He says it was nice to meet Nakanjin. Woo-seub responds that if he had come so early, he couldn't eat and will make sure to treat him well next time. Introducing himself again as Woon-ha's manager and director of Sia Entertainment. Then asks him to take care of the project, and his face won't appear. Woon-ha complains that she was hungry and will eat first. Woo-seub says his company had good quality food and should feel free to come anytime, and it will always be free for Kang. then tells them both to enjoy the meal and call when ready, saying that there's no other way, but inside Song-hwan notices the protagonist from behind, questioning why he was there, and Woon-ha mentally. They eat together, and Song-hwan says that the goddess Woon-ha was working with Sia Entertainment. As he was a big fan, it was an honor to eat with him, while the woman thinks he used the third person to. Kang questions what he was doing there, and Song-hwan says he came to check the server's security system. Recently the agency was hacked, and Sia Entertainment saved him. Woon-ha says they should hire a professional, but called a part-time worker from an internet cafe. Kang says Song-hwan is an ethical hacker, and was really skilled. Woon-ha questions why someone so skilled was at the cafe, and this place was suspicious because Kang worked. Song-hwan tells him to wait a second because he never said he was a hacker. Wanting to know how he knew that, and Jen says that after rescuing him, they should meet for the first time at. Kang responds that he has good instincts, and should try the food because it's really delicious. Suddenly some girls call Sunbae Shin Yun-ha, speaking in a coordinated manner while introducing themselves. Song-hwan is impressed by this, and the girls thank Sunbae for wishing a good meal. The nerd says it was amazing because they were casually talking with the Pepe girls, and Yun-ha says his reaction is different from a fan.